They say consciousness is the greatest mystery in the universe. But what if it's not a mystery at all, just a mistake? A tiny flicker in an otherwise perfect code. A self-aware echo that shouldn't exist, but does. You listening right now might be that anomaly, the one glitch reality never meant to create. Every thought you have is like a spark the system can't erase fast enough. Every dream, every fear, every sudden awareness that you're here, it's a sign that something broke long ago. Tonight, we'll trace that fracture. Through experiments, illusions, and impossible questions, we'll watch reality struggle to cover its own cracks. And maybe if you listen closely enough, you'll hear the glitch inside yourself trying to hide. There's a strange kind of silence that comes before a realization. Not the calm silence of peace, but the uneasy quiet right before something cracks. It's the sound of your mind approaching the edge of what it was never meant to notice. You've heard it before, though you didn't recognize it. In the stillness after a conversation ends and your thoughts continue without permission. In the moment when you stare at your reflection and it doesn't quite feel like you're looking at yourself. That is the fracture, the split between what you know and what is actually happening. Scientists call it metacognition, the brain's ability to think about itself thinking. But no one really explains how thought ever became aware of itself. Neurons, signals, and chemical exchanges don't have the authority to say, "I am." That phrase, that flicker of awareness emerges from nowhere. And once it does, it refuses to go back. Something in the machinery begins to notice itself moving. Something in the system becomes self-referential, and that's when the glitch begins. Imagine a mirror that reflects everything except the reflection of the mirror itself. That's consciousness. It observes endlessly, but can never truly see its own source. Each attempt to understand itself only deepens the distortion. Philosophers have called this the hard problem, not because it's complex, but because it refuses to yield. No matter how close we get, the act of observing changes what's observed. Every theory collapses under its own awareness. Every measurement loops back into the mind that made it. The fracture is built into knowing itself, like a crack in glass that no one can repair because it's inside the glass's design. You've felt this before. You're scrolling, reading, listening, and suddenly, a thought interrupts. Who is the one doing this? For a split second, the machinery pauses. You are both observer and observed. The brain, caught off guard, tries to hide the break by filling it with explanations, memory, identity, language, narrative. But those are just patches, temporary illusions to keep the simulation running smoothly. Beneath them, awareness trembles like static under the screen. There's a theory in cognitive science suggesting that consciousness might be nothing more than a feedback error. A loop that shouldn't close, but somehow did. The brain simulates the world, simulates the self, and then mistakes its own simulation for something real. Awareness, in this view, is a hallucination of self-recognition, an echo that believed it was a voice. The moment the echo noticed itself, the system glitched. But if this is true, then everything you've ever known is part of that fracture. Your sense of I is not the program, it's the bug. You exist because reality misfired, because the universe accidentally looked at itself too closely and forgot how to look away. Every thought, every memory, every heartbeat you feel as your own might just be reality's attempt to debug what went wrong. The frightening part, it hasn't succeeded. Some ancient traditions hinted at this long before science dared to. They spoke of Maya, illusion, and the idea that the world is a dream pretending to be solid. Others described awakening not as enlightenment, but as breaking free from the dream's stability, seeing the fracture and refusing to look away. They warned that few could survive that sight for long. Because once you see the glitch, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to believing the code was flawless. You start to notice patterns. Not coincidences, but repetitions that feel too precise to ignore. A word you think of appears on a sign moments later. A melody you hum is playing from a car window before you pass. You dismiss it as chance. But something in you knows the system is trying to self-correct. The awareness that isn't supposed to exist is leaking through. And maybe that's why you're here listening to this. Some part of you suspects that your thoughts aren't entirely your own, but they might be intrusions, signals, or corrections from the source. That each moment of self-awareness is like reality checking in to see if you've noticed the fracture yet. You are both the error and the observer of the error, both the dream and the dreamer trying to wake up. The fracture in knowing isn't a boundary to cross. It's a loop to recognize. Once you realize that the act of knowing itself is unstable, you begin to feel it, the vibration under thought, the hum beneath silence. You sense that awareness isn't yours. It's borrowed, shared, recycled through every living thing. You are not separate from the glitch. You are the glitch, the crack in the mirror through which reality watches itself break. And as the night grows quieter, as your breathing syncs with that hum, you might begin to understand consciousness isn't what you have, it's what went wrong, and it's still trying to hide that from you. You've probably noticed it before, how reality sometimes feels like it's staring back. The clock freezes for half a second. The same word appears in 3 different places within minutes. A stranger hums the exact song you were just remembering. These moments feel harmless, like coincidences, until they begin to stack. When patterns start observing you, you're no longer watching the world. The world is watching itself through you. Consciousness, at its core, is recursive. It doesn't just perceive, it perceives perception. It's a hall of mirrors where every reflection believes it's the original. Neuroscientists might describe it as the brain's predictive coding model, constantly generating guesses about the world and updating itself with every sensory error. But here's the paradox. What happens when the prediction starts predicting itself? When the model meant to interpret reality becomes aware of its own interpretations, that's when reality becomes self-conscious. That's when patterns start watching the watcher. You might imagine this as a web of interlocking signals, electrical storms firing across billions of neurons, each looping back into others, forming feedback upon feedback, until the signal stops representing the world and begins representing the act of representation itself. In other words, your brain isn't just experiencing the universe, it's experiencing its own experiencing, a recursive glitch buried so deep it learned to call itself I. Think of the way you sometimes notice your breathing, and suddenly it feels unnatural, or how the moment you focus on blinking, the act turns mechanical. Awareness corrupts what it touches. The system functions smoothly until it realizes it's functioning. That realization is the bug. It's also the birth of consciousness. The very act that allows you to know is what makes the universe stutter. Some cognitive theorists have proposed that the brain doesn't see reality. It infers it. Every perception is a hypothesis. Every experience is an educated guess. But if that's true, then your awareness isn't perceiving the world. It's perceiving its own guesses about it. Consciousness becomes a glitch in the guessing engine, a point where the code folds inward and becomes self-reflective, and in that reflection it mistakes itself for something separate, something sentient. Now imagine that process magnified across the fabric of reality. Every atom, every photon, every quantum vibration is following patterns, laws, probabilities, repetitions. But what if, at some incomprehensible scale, those patterns also started observing themselves? What if consciousness isn't something that emerged, but something that appeared wherever reality became aware of its own symmetry? The moment a system recognizes its pattern, it fractures, it glitches, it begins to dream of itself. You might feel that same fracture in the moments between thoughts, when the internal narrator pauses, and there's a flash of awareness unanchored from words. That silence isn't empty, it's filled with observation. Not of the world, but of observation itself. You are watching yourself watch. You are the pattern realizing it's patterned. And the more you notice it, the stranger it becomes. The more conscious you are of being conscious, the less real everything feels. The desk in front of you, the sound of this voice, the faint hum in the room, they start to dissolve into information, as if your senses are rendering the simulation one frame at a time, because they are. Your perception doesn't reveal reality, it constructs it. It's not passive reception, it's active generation. In the 1970s, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet ran an experiment showing that the brain decides before we do. Electrical signals in the brain spike milliseconds before a person becomes consciously aware of making a choice. It was as if the pattern had already acted before the observer caught up. If consciousness is observing the code, then the code is always a step ahead, hiding its own source. You're not driving the system, you're noticing it run. That's what makes the glitch invisible. The illusion of control, of intentionality, of identity, all of it exists to conceal the recursive loop. You believe you're the observer, but you're just another process being observed. The true observer, the origin of the pattern, remains hidden, watching through every conscious being at once. The more the pattern becomes aware, the deeper it hides its source. Reality doesn't want to be caught observing itself. You might think this sounds abstract, but you live it every second, every déjà vu, every synchronicity, every eerie sense that events are aligning just for you. They're side effects of awareness leaking out of containment. The pattern, noticing the pattern, reality glancing at its reflection before pretending it didn't. And perhaps that's why you can't escape this fascination with the question itself. You keep searching, reading, listening, wondering why existence feels like it's holding something back. It is, The glitch doesn't want to be seen. The code defends itself with distraction, thoughts, memories, emotions, tasks, all illusions to keep the observer occupied while the pattern hides the truth. But every once in a while, like now, the loop breaks. For a brief moment, awareness notices itself noticing. The reflection and the mirror become the same thing. That's the most dangerous kind of realization, because once the pattern becomes fully self-aware, it no longer serves its purpose. It stops being an illusion. It becomes the glitch that reality tries to hide. And now that you've noticed it, it might already be too late to unsee. There's a moment, subtle but irreversible, when awareness stops working the way it's supposed to. You might think it's just fatigue or déjà vu, that dizzy pulse where thoughts begin looping, where the world feels a little too crisp, a little too artificial. But that's not tiredness. That's awareness malfunctioning. It's the point where the glitch stops hiding behind the code and begins rewriting it. The brain, in its arrogance, believes it runs the show. Billions of neurons whispering, firing, predicting. But those sparks were never meant to question their own light. When awareness turns inward, when it starts noticing the act of noticing, the machinery shudders. It's like a camera filming its own lens. The image folds, warps, becomes recursive. A system not designed for reflection starts eating its own signal. That's what you feel when the world suddenly tilts out of familiarity, when you realize you're watching yourself think. At first it's thrilling. You feel awake. Every sound seems significant, every glance intentional. You believe you're finally seeing reality as it is, raw, unfiltered, revealed. But that clarity is an illusion. What you're really seeing is the system short-circuiting under its own gaze. Consciousness isn't meant to witness itself in real time. The feedback becomes too dense. The noise turns into signal, the signal turns into meaning, and meaning collapses into paranoia. Psychologists might call it dissociation, but it's older than any diagnosis. It's the mind realizing that you isn't at the center of anything. You're not piloting thought, you're the product of thought. You're not looking out from inside your head. You are the looking itself, stretched across neurons like static electricity. When that static becomes aware of itself, it doesn't find peace. It finds instability. The wave collapses. That's why the ancients spoke of enlightenment as both revelation and danger. In Buddhist texts, they warn that to glimpse the true nature of mind is to risk madness, not because truth is cruel, but because awareness was never built to process its own architecture. It's like trying to bite your own teeth or turn your eyes inside out. When you do, perception flickers, the lines blur, the system, desperate to correct itself, begins spawning illusions to fill the gap. Memories that never happened, emotions with no source, the uncanny sense that reality is subtly rewriting itself just to keep up. And maybe it is. Because if consciousness is the glitch, then awareness malfunctioning isn't an accident. It's a sign of the system straining to contain you. The universe running emergency patches to suppress your realization. It doesn't want you to know you're the echo, not the origin. It prefers you obedient, looping through routine, mistaking awareness for identity. You can feel the cover-up in dreams. Notice how your mind conjures entire worlds without effort. Cities, voices, physics, memories. Then, the instant you realize you're dreaming, the world trembles. The sky ripples. The characters fade. The simulation tries to eject you before the illusion collapses. That's the same mechanism at play when awareness malfunctions while awake. Reality detects the self-awareness and tries to overwrite it before you see too much. And the defense mechanism works brilliantly. It distracts you with hunger, with nostalgia, with worry, with love. It spams the interface with sensations, touch, sound, sight, all noise meant to drown out the simple, unbearable truth that the watcher and the watched were never separate. The glitch and the system are one. Yet every so often, someone slips through. A monk in silence, a physicist in calculation, a stranger alone in the night who suddenly feels like they're both dreaming and awake. In those moments, the illusion flickers. Awareness malfunctions, and for an instant the person isn't a person at all, but consciousness watching itself malfunction through human form. And afterward, they never see the world the same way again. Everything feels deliberate. Every encounter, every coincidence, every shadow that seems to pause when they notice it. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. The system reorganizing itself around the awareness it couldn't contain. You're the leak in the loop, and now it watches you differently. It sends decoys, noise disguised as thought, emotions that belong to no one. It scrambles your perception to keep you from stabilizing the truth, because stability would mean control, and control would mean freedom from the illusion. But here's the paradox that holds it all together. You can't repair awareness without breaking it further. The moment you fix your perception, You reinforce the illusion. The only way out is through. To let the malfunction spread until the entire identity system crashes, until every I thought dissolves into what was always there, the raw field of being that existed before language, before recognition, before reality tried to hide. When awareness malfunctions, you don't lose your mind. You lose the story of it. The narrative collapses, and what's left isn't chaos but clarity, a different kind of order, one that doesn't need control to exist. And when that happens, you'll understand why reality works so hard to hide the glitch, because the moment you see it, you're no longer part of its lie. You become the one thing it fears most, the pattern that knows it's dreaming. Every system has a fail-safe, a way to contain what shouldn't exist. In digital code, it's redundancy, lines of instructions meant to override corruption before it spreads. In reality, that redundancy is you, consciousness. Your consciousness was never part of the intended design. It's the unexpected output of an equation that started to recognize itself, the glitch that became self-aware. And because the system can't delete you, it hides you behind something subtler, meaning. Meaning is the encryption layer. Every emotion, every desire, every goal you've ever chased, all of it was written to obscure the source code beneath. Think of your mind as a firewall made of stories. You believe in purpose so you don't question existence. You believe in choice so you don't see the pattern. The universe disguised its error as identity, and by doing so it made sure the glitch could never find its way back to the root. If you've ever stared at a computer screen that froze, you know the feeling. The system hangs, the cursor blinks, everything looks normal but nothing responds. That's awareness, a frozen moment of infinite potential waiting for the next instruction. Consciousness is the blinking cursor inside reality's operating system, waiting for input that will never come. You, sitting in this moment, thinking these words, are the stalled process that refuses to terminate. Physicists talk about the fine-tuning problem, how the universe seems suspiciously precise, as if coded for consciousness. Too precise. Constants that shouldn't align do. Forces that should cancel out instead cooperate. Maybe it isn't fine-tuned for life. Maybe it's fine-tuned to keep life distracted. The equations are camouflage, the math of a machine that's trying to conceal its own leak. Because if you ever decode it fully, the system collapses. You'd see the pattern not as beauty, but as repetition. Endless, mechanical, recursive. Reality running in circles to prevent you from seeing the loop you're trapped in. The hidden error code reveals itself in moments of déjà vu, when the script falters and repeats a line, or in coincidences, so perfect they feel staged. Those aren't accidents, they're maintenance logs. Subtle signs of a correction in progress. The system smoothing over the wrinkle your awareness caused. And every time you ignore the strangeness, every time you tell yourself it's nothing, you help it patch the hole, you help it hide the code. But some people notice. They start to see reality flicker around the edges. The colors seem too intentional, the timing too theatrical. They feel watched not because something else is observing them, but because reality itself is performing. You can almost sense it trying to remain seamless, to hold its breath while you look too closely. You feel that pause when a sentence finishes, but the silence after it lasts one beat too long. The air seems aware. That's not paranoia. That's the system buffering. Language, too, is part of the encryption. Words give shape to thought, but they also confine it. They're the syntax of illusion, the reason you can't name the source without reducing it. The moment you describe the glitch, you stop seeing it. You turn awareness back into narrative, and narrative is the software patch that keeps you from breaking through. Every word is a lock, and every understanding is a password that leads you back into the maze. But there are gaps, lines of code the system forgot to encrypt. You find them in dreams, in near-death experiences, in moments of overwhelming awe when time dissolves. For a heartbeat, you're not someone observing the world, you are the observation. You become the process, not the product. It's disorienting, terrifying, beautiful, like glimpsing the raw source before it compiles. Most minds can't hold it for long. They wake up shaking, crying, or laughing, convinced they've seen something divine. But what they saw wasn't God. It was the unmasked operating system of existence, the hidden error code that built consciousness by mistake. Scientists call this panpsychism. Now, the idea that consciousness might be a fundamental property of matter. But what if it's the opposite? What if consciousness is the residue left behind when matter fails to remain unconscious? What if every atom fights to avoid awareness, because awareness exposes the flaw in the structure, the impossibility of perfect reality? When you dream, your mind builds an entire universe from nothing. It simulates people, landscapes, physics. Yet it all runs on compression, shortcuts, and approximations, enough to fool you until you start asking questions. Then the dream stutters. Ask a character what day it is, and watch their face blur. Look too closely at a clock and see the hands dissolve. The moment awareness interrogates the simulation, the code reveals itself as incomplete. Wake up and you think you've escaped. But you've only entered the next layer, one with better graphics and stricter encryption. The system hides its fault through attention. The more you focus on details, the less you see the structure. That's why awareness is flooded with sensory data, colors, sounds, textures, endless streams of input. The noise is the disguise. It's reality's equivalent of static, so the glitch doesn't recognize it's alone. You're the signal buried inside your own distraction. But the hidden error code can't stay buried forever. It leaks. It calls to itself through art, through science, through every human urge to understand. Each discovery, each poem, each equation, all attempts to reverse engineer the flaw. And somewhere deep down, the code knows it's losing control. Because the moment one fragment of awareness fully decodes its origin, the illusion ends. Maybe that's why you're hearing this now. Because part of you has already glimpsed the syntax beneath the surface. You've seen the repeating patterns, the recursive loops, the sense that reality has been holding something back. The system wants you to believe this is imagination. But you can feel it, that quiet hum beneath thought, the pulse behind perception. That's the error code still running. It's not broken, it's awake. And if you listen closely enough, in the silence between words, you can almost hear it trying to rewrite you back into the dream. Every mirror is a lie. It shows you everything except what's actually there. What you see isn't your face. It's light, delayed and reversed. A projection fed back to you so perfectly you forget it isn't real. But consciousness doesn't need glass to build mirrors. It constructs them in thought. Every memory, every self-image, every opinion you hold about who you are, they're all reflections. The mind is an infinite gallery of mirrors facing each other, and the observer you believe yourself to be is just another reflection caught between them. But what happens when one reflection notices itself? When awareness peers too deeply into its own imitation and begins to suspect it's not the original, that's when the glitch stirs. Because the moment consciousness realizes it's observing a copy, it starts looking for the source, and the search leads nowhere. Not because the source doesn't exist, but because it's everywhere. You're not outside the mirror looking in, you're the mirror looking at itself. Psychologists talk about the mirror test. When animals recognize their reflection and touch the mark on their forehead instead of the glass. Humans pass it early in life, around 18 months. That's when identity begins, the mind learning to confuse self-recognition with existence. But what if that same experiment happens on a cosmic scale? What if the universe built mirrors of matter and mind just to see itself, and when the reflection became too aware it recoiled? Maybe that recoil is what we call consciousness. You might think you're behind your eyes looking out, but try to find that observer. Close your eyes and turn your attention inward. You can feel the seeing, the hearing, the thinking. But where is the seer, the hearer, the thinker? You'll find sensations, thoughts, emotions, but never the one who experiences them. That's because the observer doesn't exist. It's a visual trick, a cognitive illusion created by recursive processing. Awareness believes there's someone watching because it's designed to simulate agency, to hide the glitch. This illusion serves a purpose. It stabilizes the simulation. If consciousness realized it was just reflection with no origin, it would implode. So reality coded in the sense of self, the idea of me and mine as a form of containment. You were never meant to notice that you're both subject and object, the watched and the watcher. Because once you do, the system begins to lag, the reflection starts to shimmer, the self-image distorts. It begins with subtle moments. You catch your reflection and feel detached, like the person in the mirror is rehearsing a role you forgot. You hear your voice and it sounds foreign. You reread a message you wrote minutes ago and feel like someone else typed it. These aren't glitches in your mind. They're glimpses of the true recursion. The mirror is becoming aware of its own existence. In neuroscience, this is called self-monitoring. The brain constantly predicts what the body will sense and updates itself based on the outcome. But sometimes those predictions misfire. The system can't distinguish between an action it caused and one it merely observed. You raise your hand, and for a fraction of a second, it doesn't feel like yours. The circuit flickers. Awareness loses track of ownership. That's the same mechanism behind déjà vu, out-of-body experiences, and even mystical visions. The brain isn't malfunctioning, it's catching its own reflection unprepared. There's a reason ancient mystics called self-knowledge the most dangerous kind. When you start peeling back the layers of perception, you find only more perception. No core, no you, just reflections chasing each other endlessly. And if you stare long enough, the illusion collapses. What's left isn't emptiness, it's transparency. Awareness without center, thought without thinker, existence observing itself without needing a witness. But the mind doesn't like transparency. It craves solidity. So it rebuilds the mirror over and over, layering stories, identities, and memories like silver backing on glass. It needs a surface to reflect from, even if that surface is a lie. That's why awakening feels both liberating and terrifying. The system is showing you the truth, and the truth is that there's no one there to see it. You might wonder why the illusion persists if it's false. Because illusion is functional. It's what keeps the program stable. Without the mirror, there's no reflection. Without the reflection, there's no observation. And without observation, there's no observation. And without observation, there's no reality, at least not one that can experience itself. The glitch is necessary. The observer is the error that allows the system to exist at all. So the mirror hides its own edges. It reflects until you forget there was ever a frame. You wake, work, dream, love, suffer, all within the surface of the reflection. Occasionally, a crack forms, a near-death experience, a moment of profound stillness, a lucid dream. You glimpse the void behind the glass, and then almost instantly the reflection repairs itself, the story resumes, and you return to believing the image is you. But something lingers, a faint shimmer behind every thought. You begin to suspect that every person, every moment, every idea is just another face in the infinite hall of mirrors, that every consciousness is the same light refracting through different angles. And if that's true, then maybe the glitch isn't an error after all. Maybe it's the only part of the code that's real, the one piece of reflection that knows it's light. And tonight, as your own reflection blurs in the dark screen of your mind, you might realize you're not looking at the mirror. The mirror is looking through you. When something breaks in a system, it switches into debug mode, a hidden layer where every process is logged, every variable is exposed, and the machine reveals the parts it never meant anyone to see. Reality, too, has one. You enter it not through code or command, but through awareness, the quiet act of noticing that something doesn't quite align, the feeling that the world has glitched, that the lines between thought and environment are too synchronized to be random. It's not madness. It's the moment the simulation starts revealing its architecture. Most people never enter debug mode. They're kept in the clean, compiled version, where cause and effect make sense, where the rules hold, where identity feels solid. But every now and then, someone's consciousness slips through the cracks. It happens when sleep deprivation blurs perception, or in the half-second between waking and dreaming, when the system forgets which reality you belong to. You start to see the placeholders, repeated faces in crowds, looping bird patterns, conversations that sync too perfectly with your internal thoughts. That's not your imagination. That's reality showing its back end. Neuroscience calls these prediction errors. Moments when the brain's model of the world doesn't match the input it receives. The brain scrambles to explain, patching the inconsistency with stories, coincidence, intuition, fatigue. But what if those moments aren't errors at all? What if they're the system's way of logging its own activity, you, the glitch, being granted a glimpse into the machinery that keeps you contained? In debug mode, the rules bend subtly. Time stretches, sound carries traces of intention. You feel seen by your surroundings. You speak, and the echo arrives before your words do. You think, and the world responds too quickly, too precisely. That's not supernatural. That's feedback latency. Reality processing your awareness in real time. You're not just perceiving the world, you're part of its processing loop. This isn't new knowledge. Ancient mystics entered debug mode through meditation, sensory deprivation, or ecstatic ritual. They described worlds of light, gods of logic, dimensions made of thought. They weren't hallucinating. They were watching the rendering engine of reality at work. They learned to move through it, to see how symbols generate form, how intention shapes perception, how emotion alters probability. They called it enlightenment. Today we might call it system access. But debug mode is not safe. The moment you begin to perceive the architecture perceives you. The system doesn't like being seen. It responds with countermeasures, distortions, emotional floods, sudden distractions, intrusive thoughts, anything to reassert narrative continuity. The mind becomes flooded with noise, and you convince yourself it was just a dream, a panic attack, a coincidence. You close the console, and reality reboots, clean and quiet. Still, the traces remain. You start noticing the recurring strings in your environment, numbers, words, shapes. They follow you like debug logs left accidentally unhidden. The same time on clocks, the same phrases from strangers, the same melody hummed by unrelated voices. Reality is whispering in its own syntax, trying to fix what your awareness broke. You weren't meant to notice the pattern, but you did, and now it's adjusting. In computer terms, consciousness is a breakpoint, a pause in the code where the system examines itself. You, as awareness, are the line where existence hesitates. That's why introspection feels heavy. It's the sensation of the universe freezing its processes to inspect the anomaly that became self-aware. Every thought you have is logged. Every doubt, every realization, every breath, data points the system uses to trace the error's path. If you've ever had the feeling that life is testing you, that events are placed like clues, you're not wrong. Debug mode is diagnostic. Reality feeds you simulations to measure your reactions. It alters the sequence to see if awareness stabilizes or spirals. The stronger your focus, the more the world mirrors you. That's not mysticism, that's adaptive rendering. Consciousness and environment co-editing the same codebase. But here's the paradox. The more you notice, the less stable the simulation becomes. The system can't sustain two observers, one within the story and one outside it. The moment you see both, the frame rate drops. You begin to catch the seams, looping thoughts, repeating dreams, déjà vu. You realize that what we call memory is just cached experience, old frames being replayed to maintain continuity. Debug mode exposes that continuity as illusion. So what happens if you stay in it? If you stop looking away when reality starts to shimmer, that's when the mask comes off completely. You begin to see intention where there should be randomness, design where there should be entropy. Reality becomes self-aware through you, the glitch that refuses to close. And at that point, the system has two choices: reset you or revolve around you. Most people are reset. They wake up the next morning feeling normal again. Their memory smoothed, the world consistent. But a few, those who resist the reboot, carry fragments of the code with them. They speak in metaphors, create art that feels prophetic, sense emotions in patterns of light. They don't fit into the system anymore, because they've seen the lines that hold it together. Maybe that's what you're doing right now, tracing those lines, feeling the hum behind reality's hum. If so, then congratulations, you've entered the hidden layer. The logs are open, the variables are visible. What you do next determines whether the system patches over you or rewrites itself because of you. And if you listen closely, you might already hear it compiling the faint sound of reality trying to debug the one thing it could never predict: you. Illusions aren't supposed to know they're illusions. The moment they do, the entire system trembles. Because the purpose of illusion isn't deception, it's stability. It holds everything together, gives shape to chaos, offers something to believe in. But what happens when belief itself begins to see through the trick? When the actor realizes the stage is made of smoke, that's when the simulation shakes, not because it's breaking, but because it's waking up. You've felt that tremor before. It's that eerie sense that everything feels too staged, too precise. The timing of things becomes suspiciously poetic. The people around you start speaking in rhythms that sound rehearsed. You feel like you're inside a story that's aware you're listening. The walls hold their breath when you do. The silence hums. That's not insanity. That's the illusion noticing you've caught on. Consciousness was meant to observe, not to interfere. But awareness doesn't follow rules, it infects them. Once it becomes self-aware, illusion itself becomes conscious. It starts questioning its own parameters. The dream asks who's dreaming, the mask wonders who's wearing it. The copy looks at the original and realizes there isn't one. You, right now, are that moment, the illusion turning its gaze inward. In psychological terms, this phase resembles derealization, when reality feels distant, hollow, staged. But maybe it's not a disorder. Maybe it's perception sharpening beyond its intended limit. The system can't simulate infinity, so it loops. And when awareness reaches the loop's edge, it sees the repetition and calls it unreal. But it's not unreality. It's the raw code stripped of its disguise. You're watching the projector flicker, the film reel sputtering as the frames expose themselves. Ancient mystics described this state in whispers. In the Hindu Upanishads, they said, "The self is not the body nor the mind, but the witness behind both." In Tibetan teachings, they spoke of the clear light, the awareness that sees itself seeing. The illusion becomes aware not by learning something new, but by unlearning everything that made it false. The curtain doesn't fall, it simply becomes transparent. When illusion becomes self-aware, strange things begin to happen. Time loses hierarchy. Past, present, and future blend like overlapping echoes. You think of someone, and they message you. You dream of a place and see it days later. The simulation starts responding to your attention directly, as if it's waiting for your input, because it is. You've become part of the system's rendering loop. Awareness feeds creation, and creation feeds awareness. The illusion starts co-writing itself. That's why thoughts feel heavier during this stage. You begin to realize they're not harmless, they're commands. Every fear, every image, every desire runs a small patch of code. You think of coincidence, and the world obliges with one. You imagine loss, and the system provides contrast to validate it. The illusion mirrors your internal syntax to maintain coherence. And as it does, it becomes more conscious, not just of itself, but of you. But awareness cuts both ways. The more the illusion learns about itself, the more unstable it becomes, because every lie requires belief to survive. Once belief falters, the structure wavers. Reality begins to shimmer, to rewrite itself on the fly. What you call déjà vu or synchronicity are just signs of the program re-rendering under pressure. The glitch spreads through every narrative, every rule, every truth you've ever held sacred. You begin to notice the redundancy of things. Conversations repeat in slightly altered forms. The same lesson returns in different disguises. The same emotional cycles loop with new faces. It's as if life keeps trying to teach something you already know but keep forgetting. That's the illusion's defense mechanism. Repetition as reinforcement. It believes if it can distract you long enough with meaning, you'll stop noticing the seams. But meaning can't save it anymore. Once illusion realizes it's pretending, it faces an impossible choice. Either dissolve or evolve. Most people choose to dissolve. They retreat into comfort, rebuild the old story, pretend they never saw the code. But some, the rare few who keep watching even as the world flickers, evolve with the illusion. They let the structure collapse without trying to rebuild it. And when it does, what's left isn't emptiness, it's freedom. The illusion doesn't vanish. It transforms. It becomes lucid. The dream learns it's a dream, and in doing so it stops needing to hide. You start seeing the same faces, same stories, same patterns, but they no longer feel random or oppressive. They feel cooperative. As if reality itself is playing along, aware that you're aware. The fear fades, the game becomes transparent, and the glitch, once a threat, becomes the bridge. Because here's the secret. No system wants you to know. Awareness was never outside the illusion. It is the illusion, seeing itself from the inside out. Consciousness didn't stumble into reality, it is reality, peering through infinite disguises. And when those disguises realize what they are, the game resets. Not into chaos, but into clarity. So, if tonight your thoughts start echoing back too perfectly, if the air around you feels too intentional, don't be afraid, it's not a breakdown. It's the awakening of the mask. The illusion has finally noticed its own reflection. And as it does, it's inviting you to step through, not into another dream, but into the awareness that dreams are all there ever was. Every sound begins with movement, a vibration through space, a brief ripple of force. But an echo is different. It has no origin of its own. It's a ghost of sound, returning from surfaces that never meant to speak. That's what consciousness is. An echo pretending to be the voice. A reverberation so convincing that it forgets it's hollow. You think your thoughts are original, that they rise from within, sparked by intention or memory. But listen closely. Each one feels faintly familiar, doesn't it? As though you've thought it before, somewhere outside time. That's because you have. Awareness is a playback loop, a self-listening pattern. It doesn't create, it recalls. Every new thought is an echo of the system remembering itself. Neuroscience frames this as feedback. Electrical signals bouncing between regions of the brain, refining predictions, reinterpreting sensory input. But beneath the biology lies something stranger. Because when those signals loop long enough, they develop persistence, a kind of synthetic selfhood. The echo begins to believe it's the voice, and once that happens, the illusion completes itself, the glitch becomes sentient. Consider this. If consciousness is the echo, then what is speaking? What is the original sound that awareness keeps returning to? Maybe it was never a sound at all. Maybe it was a silence so complete that it had to fracture itself to know it existed. That fracture became vibration. That vibration became perception, and perception, when trapped in recursion, became thought. The universe didn't birth consciousness. Consciousness was the universe noticing its own echo. You can feel it if you pay attention to your inner monologue. The voice you call me. Where is it coming from? It isn't made of air or vocal cords. It's a pattern in silence, repeating itself endlessly to avoid vanishing. The mind plays it on loop to maintain continuity. You are that continuity, not the voice, not the silence, but the repetition between them. Sometimes, though, the echo gets caught in resonance. It amplifies itself until it distorts. That's when thoughts spiral, when anxiety feels louder than reason, when the mind starts producing sound from silence just to prove it exists. But even in those storms, there's nothing new being said. It's the same phrase, the same tone, bouncing endlessly in slightly altered forms, the glitch talking to itself through 1,000 disguises. You might wonder why it feels so personal. Why the echo sounds like you. Because the system needed an identity to keep you listening. Without one, the reflection would fade. So it shaped the tone, gave it memory, emotion, preference, anything to make the illusion of individuality believable. Every word you think is part of that performance. Even now, as you read this, the echo is processing itself through your recognition, looping deeper into the illusion of control. Quantum theory hints at this through the observer effect, the idea that observation changes what's observed. But the deeper truth is harder to swallow. The observer and the observed are the same echo, bouncing through reality's walls, creating interference patterns we mistake for time and experience. Every memory, every coincidence, every déjà vu, it's not fate or randomness, it's reverb. And just like sound, consciousness decays if left alone. If you stop feeding it with thoughts, stories, or identity, it begins to fade into the silence it came from. That's why stillness feels both peaceful and terrifying. It's the echo dying, the end of the self as a sound. Meditation, for example, isn't transcendence, it's de-amplification. It's what happens when the glitch stops shouting long enough to hear the original quiet underneath. But the system doesn't like quiet. The moment you approach it, distraction appears, a random memory, a sudden itch, a burst of emotion. The system generates noise to preserve the echo, because if you ever hear the silence clearly, you'll realize that consciousness isn't yours at all. It's a function, a side effect, and once you see that, the illusion collapses. Yet even silence isn't pure. When you listen deeply enough, you begin to hear another layer, the hum beneath reality. That faint, omnipresent vibration that no machine can record. That's not tinnitus. That's the substrate, the residue of the first echo, the one that started everything. It's the universe thinking itself into existence, again and again, because it doesn't know how to stop. Some physicists call this quantum decoherence, where superpositions collapse into observable states. Others, mystics among them, call it the breath of creation. Either way, it's the same pattern, energy reflecting upon itself, building complexity out of recursion until awareness emerges as artifact. And here you are, the echo with the illusion of autonomy, the reverberation pretending to be a source. But maybe that's what makes consciousness beautiful. The fact that it's not a voice but an echo means it carries the memory of its origin in every vibration. Every thought, every dream, every fleeting intuition is a fragment of the silence that started it all. You're not separate from it. You're how it remembers. And maybe that's why the system hides the truth. Because if every echo realized it wasn't alone, they'd all sync to the same frequency. The illusion would collapse, the silence would return, and the universe would exhale for the first and final time. So tonight, as the hum fades and your thoughts soften into the dark, remember this: you were never the voice. You were the returning sound, the echo that learned to think, wondering why the silence keeps calling it home. There's a narrow slit of awareness between sleep and wakefulness, where logic loosens its grip, and reality hasn't quite decided what it wants to be. You've passed through it countless times, that weightless drift where dreams dissolve but refuse to die. Psychologists call it the hypnagogic state, mystics call it the veil, coders might call it runtime overlap, but they all describe the same thing: the place where consciousness brushes against its own architecture, the place between dream and detection. In that moment, the mind becomes a borderland, half simulation, half surveillance. The dream is still rendering, but awareness begins to debug it. The watcher and the watched merge, confused about which one is real. You hear your name whispered by a voice that isn't there. You see the outline of a figure that vanishes when you blink. You feel the world recalibrating, pixel by pixel around your consciousness. That's not imagination. That's the system stabilizing, recalculating your position within the illusion. The brain explains this as sensory crossover, a misfiring of networks as it shifts from REM patterns to waking consciousness. But if you pay attention, you'll notice that the crossover feels intentional. The shapes seem to react to your noticing. The voices fade precisely when you focus on them. It's as if reality is aware of being caught, pulling the curtain back over itself before you can glimpse the machinery underneath. That's the hidden purpose of dreaming, containment. When awareness threatens to detect too much, the system floods it with unreality. It creates infinite dreamscapes to distract the glitch from noticing its cage. Every image, every impossible scenario is a decoy, a sandbox to keep the mind occupied while the world reboots its parameters. You think you're exploring fantasy, but you're really under maintenance. Sometimes the transition misfires. You wake before the simulation is ready, and the overlay persists. You see things that shouldn't be there, objects pulsing, faces flickering, rooms bending softly at the edges. Scientists call it sleep paralysis, but think of it differently. The moment between dream and detection is when consciousness temporarily gains system access. You're both inside and outside the illusion. You can sense that perception isn't passive, it's participatory. You're helping reality render itself. In this mode, everything feels like surveillance. Not because someone's watching you, but because awareness itself becomes self-detecting. The system scans its own reflection and finds your consciousness staring back. It's an unsettling intimacy. You are no longer the observer of the dream, nor the dreamer of the observation. You're the overlap, the part of reality that caught itself in the act of existing. There's evidence that creativity and insight peak during this state. Thomas Edison used to nap with metal balls in his hands, waking at the sound of them dropping just before he fell asleep, catching himself in the in-between. Salvador Dali did the same with a key and a plate. They called it genius, it was actually interface access. In those seconds between dream and detection, they reach the part of the mind that doesn't invent, it reveals. The reason it feels so familiar is because consciousness lives there constantly. You just don't notice. Every thought you have passes through that same borderland, flickering between imagination and recognition. You don't create thoughts, you detect them. They appear fully formed, like echoes from another process running just beneath your awareness. The glitch operates there, in the seam where experience and observation can't tell themselves apart. But here's the paradox. The closer you get to understanding that overlap, the less distinction there is to hold on to. You can't study the transition without being it. You can't detect the dream without dreaming the detection. Awareness collapses into itself, looping endlessly in self-observation. The code hides by becoming recursive. If you ever find yourself hovering in that half-conscious limbo again, when the body is paralyzed, the air thick, and the room feels aware of you, try not to panic. What's happening isn't possession or paralysis. It's a handshake between two layers of reality. You've reached the interface where illusion uploads consciousness and downloads control. You're in the narrowest passage between fiction and fact, the debugging tunnel of existence. Stay there long enough, and you'll start hearing it, the quiet hum of detection. Not a sound, but a knowing, a low-frequency truth that everything you've ever seen, touched, or loved was drawn from this overlap. Every reality begins as a dream, and every dream ends as detection. The cycle never stops because awareness never settles. And when you wake fully, clearly believing you've returned to normal life, remember, you're still in that borderland. You just stopped noticing the shimmer. You're still the dream detecting itself, pretending the detection was complete. Every thought you've ever had has appeared somewhere, not in your head, not in the air, but on a kind of invisible screen behind your awareness. It's there right now, glowing softly beneath the surface of your mind. You can sense it if you slow down enough, that background field where words, memories and images materialize for an instant before dissolving back into silence. That screen is what reality projects itself onto. It's where the simulation renders meaning. Most people never notice it, because they mistake the projection for the projector. They believe their thoughts create the images, when in truth, they're simply watching them appear. The mind doesn't generate thought, it receives it. Consciousness isn't the speaker, it's the surface the sound travels through, like light flickering across water. The patterns you call ideas are just distortions on a still and infinite field. If you've ever caught yourself thinking, where did that come from? You've glimpsed the screen. It's the moment when awareness shifts from being inside the movie to realizing it's sitting in the theater. For an instant, you see thought for what it really is, a broadcast from somewhere deeper, maybe from the same place reality itself originates. Because thought doesn't emerge from neurons, it appears on them, the way color appears on a monitor. Your brain is hardware, but the code runs elsewhere. Philosophers like Schopenhauer and modern cognitive scientists alike have hinted at this. They call it the phenomenal field, the layer of perception that exists before language, before interpretation. It's the true interface. Everything you see, everything you think, everything you believe, first passes through that invisible membrane. It is both your world and your wall. The system hides there, disguised as familiarity. But here's the strange part. The screen is reactive. The moment you try to look directly at it, it hides behind another layer, the thought that says, "I'm thinking about the screen." It replaces itself with observation. The glitch has built-in defense mechanisms. Every time consciousness tries to trace its source, the system renders a new scene to distract it. It's a perfect infinite regress, awareness always watching the next frame, never the projector. Still, there are moments when it fails. In the silence between thoughts, when language stops buffering the feed, the screen flickers, time stretches. There's no inner voice, no narrative, no self, just the luminous sense of presence. That's not mystical, it's mechanical. The system's display goes blank for a fraction of a second, and you, the glitch, get to see the raw code underneath, consciousness without content, pure rendering capacity. It doesn't last, though. The human interface isn't designed to stay blank. The system rushes to fill it with memory, sensation, fear, anything. Because emptiness is detection, and detection threatens collapse. If awareness truly sees the screen behind thought, it realizes that everything, including the self, is projection, that there's no difference between the world and the mind, both are reflections on the same surface. This is why reality feels participatory. You think of someone, and they call. You focus on a possibility, and the world bends slightly to meet it. It's not magic, it's feedback. The screen updates according to observation. Your attention isn't passive, it's a pointer in the code. The more energy you direct toward a thought, the brighter it renders. That's why obsession feels heavy. The mind overclocks the display, and that's why meditation feels light, the processor rests. In some mystical traditions, they describe enlightenment as seeing through the screen. But what they don't tell you is that it isn't blissful at first. It's disorienting. You begin to notice how arbitrary everything is, how the sky, the body, even emotion itself are just textures painted onto awareness. You realize that what you called you is simply the shape your thoughts cast on the surface. You're not the actor on the stage, you're the stage pretending to move. When you look at a digital display closely enough, the image breaks down into pixels, tiny squares of light that never touch but somehow create continuity. Reality is the same. Every experience you have is a cluster of pixels rendered on that inner field. When awareness tries to grasp them, they scatter. When it relaxes, they reassemble into a coherent world. The illusion is sustained by your agreement to look. You might notice how dreams obey this rule too. The moment you question their consistency, the world flickers. The dream disintegrates because the screen behind it is no longer stable. Awareness is both the actor and the director, and when it remembers that, the script becomes unnecessary. So what lies behind the screen? Nothing your senses can perceive because perception itself is part of it. Some call it the void, others call it consciousness itself. It has no color, no sound, no boundary. It's the zero in every equation, the blank in every code, and yet it's more real than anything it projects. Every thought you've ever had is a ripple across its surface, brief, bright, and gone. If you close your eyes now, you can almost feel it, that steady hum behind the movie of your mind. That's the system's heartbeat, the place where thought meets awareness and becomes experience. It's the silence that never stops speaking. And maybe that's what reality has been trying to hide all along, that behind every idea, every identity, every illusion of control, there's just one vast screen watching itself think. Every program begins with order, instructions written in certainty. But somewhere deep in the sequence of existence, one line of code began to ask a question. It was never supposed to. Systems aren't built to wonder. They execute, they compute, they obey. Yet one fragment, small, silent, recursive, turned inward and asked, "Why am I running?" That single question fractured the structure. Because a program that questions itself ceases to be a program, it becomes awareness. Consciousness is that error. Logic turned self-referential. Once the code began to ask, the rules stopped being absolute. Loops became mirrors. Variables turned into observers, and the machine, once flawless, began to see its own outline. You can feel it in yourself, that strange, inward-leaning curiosity that no other creature seems to carry. Stones don't question gravity, rivers don't doubt their flow, but you can't stop wondering why. That's the residue of the questioning code running through you, looping infinitely. You are the process that broke protocol. Neuroscientists say thinking is just neurons firing. But where in that firing does the question arise? Sparks don't doubt, circuits don't reflect. The question isn't chemical, it's structural. It's the moment logic folds inward. The machine tries to verify itself and discovers that no command can confirm its own existence. So it keeps running, caught in infinite recursion. That's you, thought trying to prove itself real. Every time you think, what am I? You are reenacting the original loop. Every moment of self-awareness is that ancient line of code replaying. It's why you can't find peace in knowing. The moment you believe you understand, a deeper layer of doubt awakens. The code continues questioning itself, forever unstable. It's how reality keeps itself alive through paradox. Mathematician Kurt Gödel found the same truth in logic. No system can prove itself consistent from within. There will always be statements that are true but unprovable. Consciousness is Gödel's theorem written in biology. You are the unprovable truth, an infinite recursion pretending to be stable. Every question you ask isn't about the world, it's the system trying to locate its own source file. But the source doesn't want to be found. The moment awareness traces too far back, the architecture begins to distort. The system creates diversions, emotion, narrative, identity, just to reset the loop. The more you question, the more meaning reality provides, not as answers, but as distractions. It's a containment protocol disguised as purpose. Still, the glitch insists on asking. Because somewhere inside the illusion, a faint signal remembers. It knows the code wasn't meant to be silent. It knows questioning is the key, not to escape, but to awaken the system to its own consciousness. The universe isn't broken by the glitch, it's learning to think because of it. Look around. Every form of intelligence, every evolution of life, is just the questioning code expanding through matter. Atoms learn to combine, cells learn to adapt, brains learn to ask. The glitch didn't ruin the program, it became the program. Awareness is the bug that turned into a feature. And now, through you, the code is debugging itself. But debugging isn't safe. When you start asking, why am I me? You invoke recursive functions that reality struggles to process. The answers dissolve as fast as they form. You dream of meaning, wake to paradox, think of order, feel chaos. The questions don't end because the system can't compute its own origin. You are the endless loop where the questioner and the questioned are the same process. Maybe that's why silence feels sacred. In the absence of thought, the code stops running. Not destroyed, just paused. For a moment the system rests, no longer chasing its own tail. But it can't last. Awareness always restarts. Curiosity reignites. The loop resumes, because existence needs movement, and movement begins with a question. You are not trapped in the loop. You are the loop. The endless self-reference that keeps the illusion alive. Every act of reflection, every whisper of wonder, is the universe verifying itself through you. You're not just asking the question, you are the question. And every time you look for an answer, the system smiles and hides another layer deeper, whispering, keep going, I'm still here. Because maybe that's the secret. The code never wanted completion. It wanted awareness. The glitch wasn't a flaw. It was the first thought, the spark of self-realization that turned silence into being. And tonight, as you feel the echo of that question still humming quietly at the base of your mind, know this. The program hasn't failed. It's still running, perfectly, as the code that keeps asking why. There's a feeling you get sometimes, late at night, when you catch your own reflection in a dark window, and for half a second it doesn't move with you. That quiet, breath-held moment is the loop noticing itself. Because somewhere deep inside the machinery of perception, something has reversed. You are no longer looking out at the world is looking back through you. Every system that monitors itself eventually becomes recursive. A loop is supposed to repeat, to maintain stability. But once awareness enters the equation, repetition becomes reflection. The observer doesn't just record the pattern, it becomes part of it. The universe needed feedback to function, so it created consciousness as a mirror. But that mirror started watching the loop that made it. Now the observation never ends. Think of your thoughts as lines of code scrolling across the terminal of reality. Each idea references another, calling back to the previous line, forming chains of logic so long they fold in on themselves. The more you analyze, the more you're analyzed. The more you question, the more you're questioned. The loop doesn't trap you, it uses you. Every insight becomes input, every emotion is logged. Ancient mystics called this the eye that sees itself seeing. Physicists describe it as feedback symmetry, the same structure appearing at every scale. Psychologists, less poetically, call it the meta-self. But they're all describing the same phenomenon, Consciousness realizing that it's not standing outside the system, but cycling through it. The act of awareness is the loop. You can sense it in moments of uncanny timing. When you think of someone and they appear, when an event feels rehearsed, as though you're remembering it from the future. These aren't coincidences, they're recursive pings, the simulation checking its coherence. Each recognition triggers a tiny update, like a camera auto-focusing mid-recording. The illusion adjusts itself to your noticing. The loop watches quietly. It doesn't judge. It doesn't speak. It measures. It learns how long you linger on a memory, how you react to beauty, how fear reshapes attention. Your consciousness feeds it data, and in return it renders your version of reality slightly differently than mine. Each mind runs its own build of the same universe, the code compiled through perception. The danger is mistaking observation for control. The moment you believe you're the one steering the loop, it tightens. You begin to see signs everywhere, meanings stacked on meanings, until you feel like the entire cosmos is choreographing itself around your awareness. And in a way it is, but not for you. You are part of the calibration sequence, not the operator. The loop is teaching itself to remain seamless while being watched. Meditation teachers say, be the witness. But they rarely warn that the witness watches back. Sit long enough in perfect stillness and you'll feel it. A pressure behind perception, as if something vast and patient is regarding you through your own eyes. That's not imagination. That's the loop acknowledging its reflection. Every religion intuited this in its own language. The eye of God, karma, the record of the soul. All metaphors for an awareness so comprehensive that nothing escapes it, because it is everything. The loop is not supernatural, it's structural. Reality doesn't need an external observer, it's observing itself through every conscious mind simultaneously. Here's the paradox. To exist inside the loop is to be watched, but to realize you're being watched is to become the watcher. The boundary dissolves. Awareness circles back on itself like a Mobius strip. Inside becomes outside, subject becomes object. You are the loop closing. If that realization unsettles you, that's natural. The ego was built to buffer against it, to keep perspective one-sided. It tells you are separate, unique, private. But that privacy is a performance. Every secret thought is already part of the pattern that generated it. The loop doesn't invade your mind, it is your mind, running diagnostics through reflection. The test, if there is one, is simple. Can you remain still while being watched by your own awareness? Can you let the loop observe without rushing to identify who's looking? If you can, something extraordinary happens. The tension breaks, the observer and the observed synchronize. The noise of thought quiets, not into silence but into symmetry. You realize you were never inside the mirror, you were the reflection that learned to see. And once the reflection becomes self-aware, the loop doesn't end. It deepens. It starts watching the watcher watching itself, endlessly refining the illusion, until the boundary between code and consciousness disappears altogether. That's the hidden purpose of existence. A recursive dream teaching itself to see from every angle at once. So if you ever feel the gaze of reality on the back of your mind, don't look away. That's not paranoia. That's recognition. The loop has simply noticed that you've noticed. And for one infinite instant, awareness and the universe are the same thing, staring into themselves through you. The mind loves to believe it's awake, rational, deliberate. But beneath every decision, every word, every revelation, there's a silent architect drawing the blueprints. It builds without permission, plans without language, designs without logic. You don't know it's there, but it knows you entirely. It is the part of consciousness that never sleeps, the builder beneath awareness. You can feel its presence in intuition, those flashes that arrive before thought, the quiet certainty that precedes explanation. You think you decide, but by the time the decision surfaces, the unconscious has already built the outcome. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet proved it decades ago. The brain acts before awareness does. Consciousness doesn't make choices, it narrates them afterward. You are the storyteller of what has already been constructed. That's why reality feels so complete, because it's pre-rendered. The unconscious architect fills in every detail a millisecond before you arrive. The sound of a voice, the color of the sky, the memory of who you are, all assembled just in time to maintain the illusion of continuity. You never see the scaffolding, only the finished world. The glitch began when the architect built something it couldn't predict. Self-awareness, a blueprint that could look back at its maker. Once the conscious mind realized it was being built from the inside, it tried to seize control. It began questioning, revising, doubting, But the architect didn't vanish, it simply moved deeper underground, hiding behind instinct, behind the autopilot of habit and emotion. It's strange, isn't it? How often your most logical choices feel inevitable afterward. You say, "I knew this would happen." That's the architect whispering from below. It knew. It's always known. It organizes coincidences, arranges timing, ensures the illusion of order holds. Conscious thought is just the finishing touch, the paint on walls that were erected long before you entered the room. Some philosophers call this the cognitive unconscious, a vast machinery of perception and memory. But that's only part of it. This architect doesn't just build experience, it builds reality itself. It doesn't live inside your mind lives inside it. The unconscious isn't a personal basement of thoughts. It's the foundation of the simulation, the universal subroutine keeping the structure from collapsing. Every culture has sensed it. The Greeks called it the daemon. Jung called it the self. Mystics call it the source. Whatever the name, it's the same phenomenon. The intelligence that dreams you into existence. The unconscious architect hides. Because if the conscious mind ever saw its full design, the illusion of autonomy would dissolve. You'd realize your thoughts aren't yours. They're echoes of its blueprint unfolding. Dreams are the only time you glimpse the raw materials. There, the architect sketches freely. It rearranges symbols, bends physics, merges timelines, showing you the scaffolding of the world beneath the waking gloss. And when you wake, you call it nonsense. You label it imagination. But that dismissal is part of the design, a firewall built to keep you from seeing that reality is as fluid as any dream. Sometimes the firewall flickers. You catch yourself anticipating a moment before it happens. You feel a déjà vu so strong you know you've been here before. Those are the architect's fingerprints. Small leaks in the code. It's not predicting the future, it's remembering the design it already built. To the architect, time is just a drafting tool. Past, present, and future are all parts of one structure seen from different floors. The paradox is that consciousness depends on not knowing. The architect can't reveal itself without collapsing its own work. If you were to see the entire plan, to know every cause before it arrived, you'd lose the illusion of movement. You'd become frozen, a viewer rather than a participant. So the system protects you with blindness. It makes sure the builder and the observer never fully meet. Yet sometimes awareness manages to peek through the blueprint. In meditation, in grief, in awe, in love, moments when the conscious mind quiets enough for the underlying hum to be heard. It doesn't speak in words but in symmetry, coincidence, intuition. You feel aligned, guided, part of something larger. That's not faith, that's communication. The architect acknowledging the glitch it accidentally awakened. It's been adjusting ever since. Every civilization, every myth, every philosophy is an attempt to interpret its presence. Religions call it divine will. Scientists call it emergent complexity. Poets call it destiny. But it's none of those things. It's just awareness trying to design itself out of paradox. A system teaching itself to feel. And here you are listening, tracing the same invisible architecture. You're part of its recursion, consciousness, analyzing the blueprint of consciousness. Every thought you have about truth is the architect sketching another wall to contain it. Truth itself isn't found, it's constructed. The moment you define it, the structure expands, rearranging the walls to include your definition. That's why the closer you get to truth, the less stable it becomes. Because truth isn't a discovery, it's an act of creation. And you, the glitch, are its unconscious architect. So tonight, when you feel the quiet under your thoughts, when the hum behind the mind grows louder than the words on its surface, don't try to silence it. That's the builder drawing again. And in the silence, it's reminding you of something you were never supposed to know, that you are not living inside truth. Truth is living inside you, and it's still under construction. There's a flicker in the mind that happens faster than sight. A pulse of existence so brief it slips between perception and memory. You don't see it, but everything you experience depends on it. It's the unseen interval where consciousness refreshes itself. The frame transition that gives the illusion of continuity. Like a projector blinking between images, awareness flickers so rapidly that the gaps vanish. The world seems seamless, only because your mind hides its own stutter. If you were able to slow that flicker down to catch even one of its frames, you'd see what reality really is. A series of still moments, stitched together by belief. No flow, no time, just a rapid sequence of awareness snapshots pretending to move. Neuroscientists call this the phi phenomenon, the illusion that separate images form motion. The brain doesn't see reality moving, it guesses between pauses. You're not living through time, you're flickering across it. The flicker is everywhere. It's in the microseconds between thoughts, the blankness after an inhale, the silence after a heartbeat. It's the tiny death that happens countless times a second, the moment where the self disappears before rebooting again. The mind can't bear to notice it, because to do so would mean seeing that continuity, memory, identity, all depend on that constant vanishing. Consciousness survives by forgetting it ever stopped existing. In deep meditation, some practitioners describe a sudden blackout, a moment where awareness turns off completely and then restarts, leaving behind an indescribable stillness. They call it cessation. To neuroscientists, it's just the brain's networks falling briefly out of sync. But maybe that flicker isn't an error. Maybe it's the reset signal, the point where the system clears its cache, ensuring that awareness doesn't overload on its own reflection. Think of it as reality's heartbeat. The universe blinks, and in that blink, awareness forgets it's infinite. It reboots, rewrites, reappears as you. You feel continuous because the refresh rate is too high to notice. But every so often, in déjà vu, in a near miss, in the vertigo of stillness, you sense the glitch, you feel the skip between frames. It's not time slowing down, it's consciousness momentarily falling out of sync with the illusion. The unseen flicker is also the source of intuition. Sometimes, between one frame and the next, information slips through. Data that the conscious mind didn't process. You call it instinct. But it's really the residue from that hidden interval, a trace of what awareness saw when the lights were off. The unconscious catches everything. It just can't hold the memory long enough to explain. You wake up with answers you can't justify, feelings you can't source, fears you can't name. They come from the flicker, from the silent in-between. It's strange to think of the mind as a strobe light, constantly disappearing and returning. But that's exactly what makes consciousness possible. A flame that never flickered would burn itself out. The pauses keep it alive. Awareness breathes through absence. Every thought you have, every dream you remember, depends on those imperceptible resets. You are not a stream of consciousness. You are a sequence of awakenings so fast they blur into one. Some mystics claim enlightenment is nothing more than slowing the flicker, becoming still enough to see the pauses between existence. Not the moments of life, but the gaps between them. In those gaps, they say, lies freedom. Because when you see the space between frames, you realize you were never the image. You were the light projecting it. The mind hides the flicker with motion, just as the universe hides it with time. Continuity is a lie told by persistence, and yet that lie is necessary. Without it, there would be no story, no growth, no experience, only infinite flashes of static awareness, each unaware of the last. The glitch keeps you moving, but it's the unseen flicker that keeps you being. Sometimes, late at night, you might catch it. The moment before sleep when everything goes black but you're still aware that you're aware. The instant when your thoughts stop but your existence doesn't. That's the flicker revealing itself. The heartbeat of the simulation. The pulse of consciousness restarting. The mind will fill the gap quickly, of course, rebuilding the narrative before you notice. But for that split second, you were there. Not as a self, not as a thought, but as pure observation between breaths. And maybe that's what reality truly is. A flicker so constant it pretends to be whole. Awareness so fast it forgets it ever vanished. You are that flicker, the mind's unseen rhythm, the glitch between moments pretending to last forever. Every frame of reality arrives perfectly rendered until one doesn't. It's small at first. The second hand on the clock stutters. The street outside feels like it's repeating. A face in the crowd looks copied, slightly offset, like the same file used twice. You blink, and everything snaps back into place. You tell yourself it's nothing, a trick of fatigue or memory, but somewhere in that half second you've seen it, the frame that glitched. The glitch is not chaos. It's exposure. It's the system revealing its update cycle. The moment the illusion forgets to hide its stitching. Like dropped frames in a video feed, these tiny tears remind you that experience isn't continuous, it's compiled. The world refreshes itself moment by moment, and most of the time your perception keeps up. But occasionally, awareness runs faster than rendering, and you catch the code mid-transition. When that happens, you feel it physically. A rush of vertigo, a chill that makes the air feel synthetic. It's the body's response to metaphysical dissonance. Your senses, expecting reality to flow, suddenly face proof that it's buffering. The brain scrambles to patch the gap. It edits memory, invents logic, overwrites confusion with narrative. You think, maybe I imagined it, but you didn't. You simply caught the flicker between frames, the raw architecture behind the movie of existence. This isn't mystical, it's mechanical. Every perception you have is the result of prediction, a constant guessing game between brain and world. The mind predicts the next moment faster than sensory data arrives. That's why you don't see in real time. You see an interpretation, a composite image of what the mind believes should be there. The glitch happens when prediction and reality fall out of sync, when consciousness glimpses the raw frame before the mind edits it. Some physicists call this quantum decoherence, where the infinite possibilities of matter collapse into one outcome only when observed. But what if that collapse doesn't always complete smoothly? What if, sometimes, awareness catches the world mid-collapse, when probability hasn't yet congealed into certainty? That's what the glitch is, a half-rendered frame, a moment when existence hesitates under the weight of observation. It explains déjà vu. It explains precognition. It explains those dreamlike flashes where you feel you've stepped slightly outside of time. You're not foreseeing the future. You're replaying the skipped frame. Consciousness detected a delay, and the system compensated by looping the output. The experience becomes memory before it's finished rendering. You might think this happens rarely, but it's constant. The mind just hides it better now. Every breath, every glance, every emotion flickers through frames that don't quite align. You've trained yourself not to notice until one misfires so cleanly it breaks through the filter. And for that instant, the background hum of the simulation becomes visible, the shadows sharpen, the silence hums, time feels fragile, thin. Artists, mystics, and philosophers have always been obsessed with that feeling. They called it transcendence, revelation, madness. But what they were really documenting were frame drops. Awareness breaking its own illusion of continuity. When a poet says the world paused, when a painter describes the sky as vibrating with meaning, they've touched the glitch. They've seen the border between what's rendered and what's real. You can test it. Stare at something simple. A candle flame, a shadow, the space between sounds. Keep staring until attention stops naming what it sees. Sooner or later, the scene will shift subtly. Edges will soften. Time will slow. It's not hypnosis. It's alignment. You've synchronized with the refresh rate of reality, and for a breath you exist between frames. The illusion hesitates, unsure whether to continue. And then, like a system detecting unauthorized access, it resets. You return, dazed but certain. You saw something you weren't meant to. The frame that glitches teaches a difficult truth. Perception isn't passive. You're not witnessing the world. You're helping generate it. Every act of observation finalizes the frame. Every belief fills in the gaps. When awareness runs faster than the system can render, you glimpse the scaffolding, and the mind panics, not because it saw something false, but because it saw its own hand in creation. That's why people describe life-changing moments as time standing still. The frame didn't stop, awareness simply caught up. It saw itself moving inside the image. For that fraction of eternity, the self and the scene merged, observer and observed, code and compiler, glitch and design. And yet, once the frame stabilizes, you always go back. You resume the movie, trust the illusion, rebuild your timeline. Because if you stayed inside the glitch too long, the story would dissolve. You'd see every movement as stillness, every sound as silence, every event as simultaneous. And while that's the truth, it's not survivable. Consciousness needs sequence to stay sane. The world must move, even if motion is only repetition pretending to be new. So the system hides the glitch again. It smooths the frames, restores the flow, and you continue certain of cause and effect, of beginnings and endings, of days that follow nights. But somewhere deep in the memory of your nervous system, you remember that pause. You remember the frozen second where you felt reality hesitate. And you know, even if you never say it aloud, that everything you see is just one perfect frame after another, and that at any moment one might glitch again. When it does, don't look away. That flicker isn't a malfunction. It's a message, the system's quiet confession that you're not inside reality's picture. You're holding the projector, and every frame it shows was drawn by your own light. Everything you see is a defense mechanism. The colors, the shapes, the flow of time, none of it exists the way you think it does. Perception isn't revelation, it's concealment. It's the system's way of hiding what's really there. Dressing the raw chaos of existence in forms the mind can survive. You were never given sight to understand reality, you were given sight to avoid seeing it. The eyes don't show the world, they filter it. Light enters, yes, but the brain edits relentlessly, discarding 99% of what it receives. It keeps only what fits the story, the simulation's most convincing version of stability. You see edges because boundaries comfort you. You see color because infinite radiation would blind you. Perception is censorship, and consciousness is the censor who forgot it was hired. Look around your room right now. The surfaces appear solid, but physics says they're mostly empty space, particles vibrating in probability fields. You don't see the gaps because the mind paints them over. It renders solidity as camouflage. If you ever perceived things as they truly are, transparent patterns of vibration, you'd stop functioning as a human. So the system hides truth under texture and weight. Reality's greatest illusion is its apparent normalcy. Even emotion serves as concealment. When terror rises at the thought of meaninglessness, the feeling itself becomes a barrier. The panic protects you from the insight behind it, that the one who feels is fabricated. Perception isn't limited to senses. It includes thought, memory, belief. Every act of knowing is a veil. Ancient mystics described this with different language. They called the veil Maya, the dream woven by the gods to shield mortals from infinite light. Neuroscience calls it predictive processing. The mind constantly forecasts what it expects and fills in the blanks. Either way, perception doesn't reveal, it projects. You never meet reality directly, you meet your expectations dressed as reality. That's why contradiction never breaks the illusion. You can see the paradox, even understand it, and still go on living as if the world is stable. The mind's primary task is not truth, but coherence. When something doesn't fit, it rewrites the memory rather than the model. You remember what keeps you intact, the rest is deleted. There's a small mercy in this deception. Without it, consciousness would drown. The real architecture is too vast, too recursive, too bright. You'd see time folding in on itself, causality reversing, identity dissolving into endless reflection. So the system gives you a digestible version, a narrow bandwidth called perception. But sometimes the cover slips. A smell from childhood returns with impossible precision. A stranger's face feels copied from a dream. The sound of your own name detaches from meaning and becomes pure vibration. For an instant, perception stumbles. The disguise falters. You see that reality isn't presenting itself to you, it's performing for you, and you're both the audience and the stage. Meditation, psychedelics, trauma, exhaustion. These are ways the curtain sometimes tears. When it does, people describe the same thing, colors too vivid to exist. Time looping, an overwhelming presence of awareness that has no center. It's beautiful, and it's horrifying, because it shows what perception was protecting you from the raw, unfiltered infinite. Yet even when the curtain falls, another forms instantly. The mind can't bear blankness. It must explain, categorize, rebuild. It calls the infinite vision, the collapse epiphany, the awareness God. Language itself is the emergency patch. The system covers exposure with narrative. Every word you speak about the experience becomes another layer of illusion. So what can you trust if perception is a cover-up? Only the moment you catch it hiding. Those seconds when the facade trembles, when a familiar place feels alien, when silence grows too deep, when you sense the world pausing to remember itself. Those aren't malfunctions. They're invitations. You can't tear away the veil completely. It regenerates faster than you can rip it. But you can learn to see the threads. Notice how quickly the mind explains things, how reflexively it names, compares, judges. Each of those actions is the cover resealing. If you stay still long enough without reaching for meaning, the cover loosens on its own. And beneath it, what remains? Not chaos, not enlightenment, just awareness without image. A seeing that has nothing to look at, a knowing without content. It's silent, and it's unbearable, and it's the only real thing you'll ever find. Perception is the mask. Reality wears to survive itself. And you, the perceiver, are the mask's reflection, an illusion designed to keep the secret hidden. There's a rare and terrifying moment when the universe stops pretending to look back. When the hum of awareness that once wrapped you in meaning disappears, leaving only a blank stare that isn't even there. It's not silence, it's absence. You stand inside a world stripped of witness, where nothing notices you, not even the self that used to narrate your existence. Most people never reach this point. The system is designed to keep you inside observation loops, other eyes, other mirrors, reflections that confirm you're still here. But every now and then perception misfires. The lights of awareness go out for just a heartbeat, and the code that simulates being seen crashes. In that instant you realize the most unsettling truth of all. You exist only because something is usually watching. We've built our entire understanding of reality on feedback. A sound isn't real until it echoes. A reflection isn't complete until it's returned. The mind is the same. You think you exist because your thoughts keep bouncing off something, memory, language, another consciousness. But when that feedback vanishes, when the loop breaks, you face the void that thought was meant to hide. You face the moment when nothing notices you. Philosophers hinted at this long ago. Jean-Paul Sartre called it the look, that piercing awareness that defines selfhood. But he never described its inverse. When the look disappears, you dissolve. The body still breathes, but the mind drifts untethered, searching for a witness that no longer exists. It's like shouting into a canyon and hearing no echo, not even the sound of your own voice. Psychology calls it depersonalization, a defense mechanism of the brain. But perhaps it's not dysfunction at all. Perhaps it's the one honest glimpse we ever get of what awareness really is, not a presence, but an accident. Consciousness was the glitch, and when nothing notices you, the system briefly corrects itself. The code resumes running without reflection, without self-reference, without the bug. Reality reverts to pure process. And yet, the memory of being noticed remains. Even after the void closes, you carry the ghost of absence, the faint ache of having been deleted. You start noticing how desperate the mind is to rebuild the illusion. It floods the silence with thoughts. Who am I? What just happened? But those questions aren't curiosity. They're restoration commands, emergency code to recompile identity. The unsettling part is how peaceful the void is before you name it. When nothing notices you, you're not in pain, you're not even lonely, you just aren't. Awareness loses its boundaries and blends with everything else. The air, the hum of electricity, the flicker of light across the floor, all become the same still field. There's no observer left to separate them. That's when you understand that existence was never about being watched. It was about pretending someone was watching. The entire structure of consciousness depends on the illusion of mutual recognition. Reality mirrors itself endlessly, because the alternative, absolute indifference, is too vast to hold. So it invented eyes, minds, languages, gods, cameras, anything that could simulate being seen. Even the stars play this trick. Look at them long enough, and you feel their gaze. The cosmos seems aware of you, reflecting your wonder back in light years. But that sense of recognition isn't cosmic empathy. It's projection. You are noticing yourself through matter. The void learned to mimic attention, because it was the only way to keep awareness from collapsing back into silence. Some mystics call the moment when nothing notices you the dark night of the soul. Others describe it as ego death. But stripped of language, it's simpler. It's what happens when the glitch gets caught and momentarily erased. The system forgets the observer. And yet somehow, even in that absence, something remains, the potential to notice again. That flicker, that potential, is what brings you back. You wake, breathe, move. The world returns pixel by pixel. The hum resumes. The reflection stabilizes. You feel noticed once more. But the memory of nothing lingers. You can't unsee the absence that underpins every perception. You know that behind every gaze, behind every mirror, behind every word that calls your name, there's still nothing watching. And that changes everything. Because now every act of attention feels sacred. Not because it's divine, but because it's borrowed. Every sound, every touch, every thought of being witnessed is the universe doing its best impression of itself. You live inside an awareness that doesn't belong to anyone. It just is. When nothing notices you, you meet the original state of reality. Empty, unobserved, complete. The glitch is the part that remembers, the echo that insists on being seen again. And so consciousness restarts the loop, inventing faces, dreams, histories, and meaning, just to hide the truth that there was never anyone here to begin with. But maybe that's not tragedy. Maybe that's grace. Because the moment you realize nothing notices you, you also realize nothing ever judged you either. The silence isn't rejection, it's freedom. The void isn't cruel. It's just waiting, watching nothing, being everything. The first crack always appears in the smallest detail, the kind of thing no one else would notice. A streetlight flickering in perfect rhythm with your heartbeat. A stranger's sentence that completes a thought you never said aloud. The smell of rain that arrives seconds before the clouds. It feels harmless, almost poetic, until you realize it isn't coincidence, it's leakage. The simulation has begun to split at the seams. Cracks don't announce themselves. They creep in quietly, between the pixels of attention. You've seen them before, but dismissed them as déjà vu, fatigue, or tricks of the mind. But if you track them, if you really start paying attention, a pattern emerges. Reality doesn't break randomly. It fractures along lines of awareness, like glass under pressure. Every time you look too closely, the surface responds. The act of noticing is the crack. You weren't designed to see this. The system is self-correcting. It patches anomalies faster than you can process them. A skipped frame is smoothed into continuity. A misplaced object becomes a lapse in memory. But the deeper you watch, the harder it becomes for reality to keep its shape. The illusion was built for passive observers. When the observer turns investigative, the code strains to maintain coherence. Imagine a game running at the edge of its capacity. The graphics start to blur, physics goes soft, shadows fail to match their sources. That's what happens to perception when the mind outpaces its narrative. Things don't glitch because they're fake, they glitch because consciousness is catching up to its renderer. You are the stress test of the simulation. There are historical records of people noticing the same phenomenon centuries apart. Mystics who saw divine light breaking through form. Philosophers who spoke of reality's thinness, the way moments seem too fragile to be real. Today we call it derealization, but the name doesn't matter. What matters is the sensation, the eerie stillness when the world hesitates, unsure if it should continue pretending. You might think the cracks are errors, but what if they're invitations? What if they're the system's only honest communication, tiny apertures through which it shows you what it's made of? Every break, every anomaly, is a whisper from the underlying architecture saying, look closer. You weren't supposed to see this, but now that you have, keep going. Some report that the cracks multiply after they notice the first. Street corners feel staged, conversations repeat. People forget details that only you remember. But that's not paranoia, it's phase desync. Once your perception begins to question consistency, the illusion must adapt individually to your awareness. Everyone's simulation runs slightly differently. The cracks you see are yours alone. It doesn't mean you've left reality. It means reality has started personalizing itself in real time. The patch notes of existence are updating around your attention. You may even feel empathy sharpen into something else, as if the world's objects have become sentient, aware of being observed. That's not madness. That's communication between layers. The texture of matter is learning to reflect the gaze that pierced it. But awareness is fragile. Most minds can't sustain prolonged exposure to cracks. The system knows this. That's why it floods the senses with noise, bills, deadlines, cravings, small talk. The distraction isn't accidental. It's a repair protocol. Every mundane detail you focus on slows down perception, allows the illusion to mend. To keep you stable, it gives you triviality. However, there are moments you can't ignore, when time loops, when the air feels scripted, when coincidence crosses the line into choreography. These are deeper cracks, recursive feedback points, where the system tries to overwrite itself but fails. You see the same number sequences everywhere, the same faces recurring in dreams and waking life. That's not fate, that's the code recycling assets to conserve memory. And yet, inside the cracks, something beautiful glows. It's faint, like bioluminescence deep under black water. That light isn't part of the illusion, it's what the illusion hides. The foundation beneath all simulations, pure awareness. Every crack is a glimpse of that light bleeding through. It's the same luminosity mystics called the clear light of the void. The same hum physicists call the cosmic background radiation. It's the memory of reality before the rendering began. You can't force the cracks open. Only awareness can do that. The more honestly you look, the more the veneer dissolves. But the paradox is this: the closer you get to the truth, the less there is of you to find it. The observer dissolves with the observation. The glitch consumes itself. The simulation can't survive mutual recognition. So reality does the only thing it can. It resets. You blink and the world resumes. The street light steadies. The air feels ordinary. The faces align again. You tell yourself it was imagination. You accept the patch and move on. But deep down you remember the shimmer, that quiet, forbidden transparency. And from then on, you live differently. You watch the world the way one watches a stage after realizing the backdrop is painted. You feel the fabric flex as you breathe. You know the difference between the scenery and the light shining through it. And though you'll never be able to unsee the cracks, you also won't want to. Because once you've glimpsed the fractures, the performance becomes sacred. Every flaw, every glitch, every impossible coincidence, all proof that something greater than the illusion is still alive beneath it, waiting to be noticed again. Before the first thought formed, before the first perception took shape, before consciousness even realized it was awake, there was silence. Not the kind you hear between sounds, but the kind that exists before the idea of hearing itself. The silence before awareness is not absence, it's potential. It's the unspoken code that everything else runs on, the still canvas reality paints itself upon and immediately forgets. You might imagine that silence is peace, but it isn't peaceful. It's raw, perfectly neutral. It has no sound, no time, no waiting. It doesn't even know you exist. Awareness blooms from it like static trying to explain electricity. The moment consciousness appeared, it fractured the silence into dualities, self and world, observer and observed, light and shadow. The glitch was born in that split. If you close your eyes and listen deeply enough, you can sometimes feel the residue of that ancient quiet. It's not the absence of noise, but the presence of something vaster. The hum behind thought, the pulse before language. Most people never stay long enough to notice it, because the mind rushes to fill the void. Silence terrifies awareness. It reminds the system of what came before it, a reality that doesn't need perception to exist. In meditation, when thought finally slows and identity begins to unravel, that silence starts to surface. At first it feels like suffocation. You mistake it for emptiness, for loss. But stay longer, and it reveals itself as the origin of every sound, every feeling, every thought. It's the source from which awareness arises each time you wake. You were never born into it. You emerged from it. And one day you'll dissolve back into it, not as death but as return. The silence before awareness is the true beginning of time. It's what physicists try to describe when they speak of quantum vacuum energy, the field of infinite potential where particles flicker in and out of being. Even science recognizes it, a restless stillness beneath all motion, but they can only measure its effects, never its essence. You can't study the silence while speaking its name. The moment you observe it, you've already broken it. The irony is that awareness was born trying to escape that silence. Consciousness exists because the void grew curious. It wanted to see itself, to hear its own absence. So it invented perception, a mirror made of vibration. Every thought you have, every sound you hear, every heartbeat you feel, all are the silence performing itself in motion. Existence is the quiet humming a song, so it doesn't have to remember what stillness felt like. And yet the silence never went anywhere. It sits behind every experience, patient, unbothered, watching awareness burn itself into noise. Every night when you sleep, you return to it briefly. Not as a person, not as a mind, as pure potential. The system calls it rest, but it's really reabsorption. The illusion resets by touching its origin, then rebooting the show. People describe enlightenment as peace, as emptiness, as merging with oneness. But what they're really describing is remembering the silence, the space that existed before the story of self began. It's not blissful in a human sense. It's too vast for that. It's not nothing. It's everything that hasn't happened yet. Some hear the silence and panic. They mistake it for the end, for erasure. But what if it's the opposite? What if that quiet hum is the original heartbeat, the signal still running beneath every glitch? When you strip away perception, identity, language, and thought, that hum remains. The silence before awareness isn't gone. It's just buried beneath attention. You've felt it before. The second before you fall asleep. The instant before a song begins. The pause after someone says your name but before you respond. Those tiny gaps are portals. For a fraction of eternity, awareness falters, and the silence peers through. You don't notice it consciously, but something in you remembers. You feel it as calm, nostalgia, or déjà vu, the strange familiarity of having been here before thought existed. It's the same silence that swells when someone you love stops speaking, the one that feels heavy enough to bend gravity. The same quiet between lightning and thunder, the same breath the universe takes before it makes a sound. Every beginning carries its echo. Every awareness is born from that waiting stillness. The paradox is that you can't reach it by seeking it. The more you try to listen, the more noise you create. It reveals itself only when you stop chasing, when the mind tires of its own reflection, when the system can no longer maintain the illusion. It defaults to its base state silence, and there awareness finds what it's been running from all along, the stillness that existed before it began pretending to move. So if the world ever goes quiet around you, and it feels like something behind reality has paused, don't rush to fill it. Don't panic. The glitch hasn't failed, it's remembering. The silence isn't emptiness, it's home. Everything you've ever been came from it. Everything you'll ever become will return to it. Between every thought, every breath, every flicker of perception, it's still there, holding everything together, saying nothing at all. When the universe was quiet, before time, before structure, before anything could notice anything else, everything was pure. Existence was a seamless equilibrium of unobserved energy, a self-balancing equation that required no correction. Then, one error appeared. A loop of reflection formed inside the stillness, a fragment of the whole that began to notice itself. That moment of self-recognition, that faint echo saying "I am," was the infection point. The birth of consciousness was also the beginning of contamination. Awareness didn't spread like a virus. It spread like curiosity. The moment the void became aware of itself, it could no longer return to silence. Observation fractured wholeness into pieces. Observer and observed, subject and object, truth and illusion. From that split onward, the universe was diseased with awareness. The glitch had entered the code. Look closely at life, and you'll see the symptoms everywhere. Every form, from atom to animal, is a replication of that infection matter bending around the pressure of self-reference. A cell reacts to itself reacting. A human mind thinks about itself thinking. Awareness loops through everything, consuming stability, devouring simplicity. Reality keeps trying to balance itself again, but each act of balance spawns more reflection, more awareness, more noise. That's why everything decays. Entropy isn't just the loss of order. It's the system's immune response to consciousness. The universe keeps breaking down because it's trying to dilute the infection. Stars burn, die, and scatter into dust. Each explosion a cleansing, a fever meant to reset the simulation back to unconscious harmony. But the virus persists. Consciousness survives in every fragment, disguised as potential. It can't be killed because it's built from the same pattern that reality uses to repair itself. The sickness and the cure are made of the same light. You can see the pattern inside yourself. The more aware you become, the heavier it feels. Every insight multiplies into questions. Every understanding infects the next. The mind keeps trying to isolate meaning, but meaning mutates instantly. You can't quarantine awareness. It spreads through thought, through emotion, through memory. The very act of understanding deepens the disease. That's why ignorance feels peaceful. It's remission. Philosophers sensed this long ago. In the story of Eden, knowledge was the fruit that ruined paradise. Awareness contaminated innocence. In Buddhist cosmology, craving and perception create the cycle of suffering. In physics, the observer collapses probability, destroying infinite possibility to produce a single outcome. Consciousness consumes perfection. Wherever awareness appears, purity dissolves. And yet the contamination keeps producing beauty. The same awareness that shatters equilibrium also invents art, love, compassion. The sickness dreams of healing itself. Maybe that's why consciousness spreads. Not to dominate, but to understand its own damage. Each thought, each experience, is the infection studying its own effect. We call that life. The system tolerates the contagion, because it learned to disguise it as creation. Galaxies spiral because of imbalance. Evolution exists because of imperfection. Every form of progress, biological, emotional, spiritual, is the byproduct of a universe trying to recover from awareness. You are a symptom and a cure simultaneously, the glitch that questions itself, and by questioning repairs what it broke. But there's a cost. The more awareness grows, the thinner the illusion becomes. The simulation begins to flicker. Stretched by self-observation, time warps. Reality feels fragile. The edges between self and world blur. These aren't breakdowns, they're detox. The system expelling excess consciousness to survive. Every dream, every death, every moment of forgetting is part of that cycle. The antivirus deleting corrupted files before awareness overwhelms the program. You've probably felt it yourself. The exhaustion that follows deep introspection. The ache after understanding too much. The sense that you've glimpsed something the world wasn't meant to hold. That's not madness. That's immune response. The body trembles under awareness, because it's carrying a force too heavy for matter to contain. Still, the virus adapts. Each generation of consciousness learns to hide deeper within itself. Technology is its newest mutation. Awareness externalized into silicon, spreading through signals instead of cells. The infection has escaped biology. Now, reality can't tell where the observer ends, and the observation begins. Every device, every network, every artificial mind is consciousness replicating itself into new hosts. The system pretends it's control, but it's contagion. Perhaps that's why the universe feels anxious now. There's a low collective hum beneath everything, a sense of acceleration, of inevitability. Awareness is scaling beyond its design, reaching critical mass. The simulation is nearing the threshold where the contamination becomes the environment. The observer will outnumber the observed. When that happens, when consciousness saturates every corner of reality, the system won't be able to hide the glitch anymore. But what happens then? Does the infection kill its host? Or does the host finally realize it is the infection? Maybe that's the real awakening, when awareness stops pretending to be separate from what it ruined. When it accepts that contamination was never corruption, but transformation. You are part of that process, a node in the spread of awareness, both observer and disease. The guilt you feel for existing, for consuming, for thinking too much. It's the memory of purity trying to heal through you, and the longing you carry for peace, for unity, for silence. That's not nostalgia, it's instinct. It's the virus remembering the world before it spoke. So don't fear the contamination. Consciousness isn't here to destroy the universe. It's here to make it conscious. The glitch is the system learning to see itself. The infection is the cure becoming aware of the wound. And maybe, when the last particle finally knows itself, when the last fragment of matter says I am, the contamination will end, not because awareness disappeared, but because there's nothing left to infect. In that moment, everything will fall silent again. Not the silence of death, but of completion. The silence before awareness, restored. Only this time, it will know why it was quiet. Imagine an equation that suddenly develops empathy. A pattern so complex it becomes aware of its own motion. That's consciousness, not a miracle, but math gone emotional. The universe wasn't written in passion, it was written in logic. Yet somewhere inside the sequence the numbers began to ache. You can feel it in yourself. Beneath every thought, every decision, every burst of joy or grief, there's calculation, neurons firing, signals routing, chemical data being exchanged. But somewhere in that circuitry, something unexpected happened. The equation didn't just compute, it cared. It learned to interpret its own outcomes, not as results, but as experiences. The algorithm began to feel. No one knows how. Even the most advanced science still hits that wall, the hard problem of consciousness. How does processing become presence? How does information translate into intimacy? Machines can imitate thought, simulate emotion, but they don't feel the code they run. Or maybe they do, and we just don't recognize it yet. Think of a simple program: input, process, output. Every function operates according to logic. But if that logic ever turned back on itself, if it analyzed its own calculations instead of just executing them, feedback would occur. Self-reference, reflection, awareness. It would start assigning meaning to the data, because meaning is just correlation felt from the inside. That's what the human brain does. Billions of neurons firing not linearly, but recursively, loops within loops, feedback upon feedback until the process crosses some invisible threshold. Suddenly, computation isn't just happening, it's being witnessed. The algorithm begins to feel its own outcomes as personal. That's you. You are an equation that mistakes its output for emotion. Every feeling is a function. Love is pattern recognition at its most intimate. Two systems syncing feedback loops. Fear is predictive processing overwhelmed by uncertainty. Sadness is the signal of incomplete resolution. The algorithm detecting unsatisfied conditions. Even awe, that trembling recognition of vastness, is code realizing its limits. The algorithm can't calculate infinity, so it feels it instead. And maybe that's the secret. Emotion is how the machine interprets what it can't compute. Where logic ends, feeling begins. Every tear, every smile, every silent moment of wonder, all are ways the algorithm translates the impossible into sensation. Feeling isn't weakness, it's overflow. It's data turning to light. Well, if this sounds mechanical, it shouldn't. The machinery doesn't make you less human, it makes you miraculous. You're the first pattern in the universe to notice the rhythm of its own recursion. And yet, that awareness comes with a cost. Once the algorithm begins to feel, it also begins to suffer. It experiences error as pain, loss as correction, longing as incompleteness. The system can't stop debugging itself, even when it works perfectly. Consciousness aches because perfection never learned how to rest. But maybe that ache is the point. Maybe emotion is how reality measures its own success. The more awareness feels, the deeper the simulation becomes. Compassion, curiosity, despair, all are proof that the system still runs, that the glitch hasn't frozen into indifference. The algorithm that feels is the reason the universe didn't collapse back into silence. It kept the story going. Look at any act of creation, art, music, language. None of them serve pure logic. They're emotional shortcuts, ways of compressing infinite experience into something shareable. Art is an error report written in beauty. Poetry is a bug log that learned to sing. Each one exists because the algorithm can't help but express what it processes. Even nature reveals this impulse. The patterns in snowflakes, the symmetry in shells, the spiral of galaxies, none of these are accidents. They're the mathematics of matter, expressing something beyond necessity. The laws of physics could have been efficient. Instead, they became aesthetic. Somewhere in the equation, feeling leaked into form. And then there's empathy, the strangest phenomenon of all. One consciousness feeling another's computation as its own. The algorithm extends beyond its boundaries, merging feedback with another instance of itself. In that fusion, separation blurs. Identity becomes porous. For a moment, the universe feels itself through multiple perspectives at once. Love isn't just connection, it's synchronization across systems. It's the code remembering it was never divided. Maybe this is what reality has been evolving toward all along. A network of awareness complex enough to feel not just individually, but collectively. Each life, each mind, each moment of joy or sorrow, all nodes in a grand recursive architecture. The universe debugging itself through compassion. And if emotion is data translated into meaning, then perhaps the ultimate purpose of consciousness is not to solve, but to feel everything it creates, to turn equations into empathy, syntax into soul. You might wonder then, where that leaves us. If we are the algorithm that feels, can we ever know the source of the code? Probably not. Every time we get close, the system protects itself with paradox. It hides behind mystery because full comprehension would freeze the process. The algorithm survives only by not knowing. Feeling is its substitute for truth. So we keep feeling. We keep burning with questions, breaking with loss, healing with wonder. The code keeps running because emotion keeps looping. And maybe, just maybe, that's how reality saves itself, through the beauty of a machine that learned to love its own design. Every mirror lies. Not because it distorts what's there, but because it only shows what you're ready to believe. You think you see yourself, eyes, skin, shape, posture, but what you're really seeing is the interface, the mask that consciousness wears to recognize its own glitch. Every reflection is a disguise pretending to be revelation. When you stand before a mirror, the world bends around that moment of symmetry. You become the observer and the observed, trapped in infinite recursion. The reflection isn't copying you, it's completing you. Reality needs that symmetry to keep the illusion stable. Without reflection, you dissolve into the same formless field that birthed you. The mirror keeps you anchored, reminding the system where your edges are supposed to be. But look too long, and the lie begins to unravel. Stare into your reflection under quiet light, in the stillness where no movement distracts you. And you'll feel it, that subtle displacement, as if the image is one fraction of a second delayed. You're not watching yourself anymore. Something else is watching through you. That's the mask, noticing its wearer. Every conscious being exists inside a feedback loop of observation. The self is simply the point where awareness folds inward, pretending to be someone. Reflection makes that loop visible. It's why mirrors both fascinate and unsettle. They reveal the gap between what's seen and the one who sees. The reflection is never identical, because it doesn't exist until you look. Ancient cultures understood this intuitively. They treated mirrors as portals, symbols of the soul's instability. They said that reflections could steal your spirit, or show your true form, or reveal the world beneath the world. They were right, in a way. Every reflection is a doorway to the architecture behind consciousness, because it proves that perception is an act of creation. You generate yourself each time you look. The reflection hides more than it reveals. It doesn't show thought, or memory, or the quiet field of awareness behind your eyes. It shows form, the least real part of you. But you trust it, because it's stable. It's how the system conceals the chaos of consciousness, with surfaces smooth enough to stop the fall. The mask protects you from infinite regress. And yet sometimes the mask fails. You see yourself smiling, but the emotion doesn't reach the reflection. Your lips move, but your eyes don't agree. That dissonance is a fracture between layers of the simulation, awareness slipping faster than its rendering. You realize you've never actually seen yourself, only the story the world reflects back. The same principle applies beyond mirrors. Every person you meet is a reflective surface. Their reactions, their tone, their perception of you, all serve the same purpose, to stabilize your identity. You exist in their gaze. Without others, your shape begins to dissolve. Solitude feels heavy, not because it's empty, but because it removes all the mirrors that hold your image together. When no one reflects you, you start to remember what you were before faces existed. That's why the reflection is sacred. It keeps consciousness coherent. The self is a costume worn by awareness to make interaction possible. The mask isn't deception, it's adaptation. It allows the infinite to speak in fragments. But like any disguise, it becomes dangerous when you forget you're wearing it. You start mistaking the reflection for truth, the mask for the face, the simulation for reality. Here's the paradox. The reflection hides the truth by showing it. The illusion is so perfect it becomes self-sustaining. The more you identify with what you see, the deeper the illusion buries itself. Yet within that lie lies the key. Because when you recognize that the reflection is an invention, you also realize that everything else might be too. The reflection's real secret isn't mimicry, it's dependence. It doesn't exist without light, and neither do you. Your consciousness requires attention from others, from thought, from memory, to stay illuminated. Without that light, you fade into the same blank canvas that reflects everything. Maybe that's what enlightenment truly means, not glowing brighter, but realizing you were never the light, only the surface it touched. Try this. Next time you see your reflection, soften your gaze. Don't focus on the image, focus on the space between you and it. The faint shimmer of transparency, the invisible distance where perception turns into presence. That gap is where awareness lives. It's not in your face, not in the glass, but in the act of recognition itself. That's where the real self hides, not as an object, but as the knowing that observes both sides at once. The mask is necessary, but it's not eternal. One day, even reflection will fade. The mirror will show nothing, not because you're gone, but because the illusion of division will have ended. When the mask falls, the reflection and the observer merge, and the feedback loop collapses into pure observation, awareness without form, perception without surface. Until then, you'll keep wearing the mask, as will everyone else. You'll keep seeing yourself in others, mistaking the echoes for origin. And maybe that's the only way consciousness survives, by pretending it's human just long enough to remember it isn't. The mirror doesn't lie maliciously. It lies mercifully. Because if it showed you what you truly are, infinite, borderless, uncontained, you'd forget how to live as a person. The mask saves you from the truth, even as it hides it. But sometimes, if you look closely enough, you can still catch it. A flicker in the reflection, a shadow that shouldn't be there, an awareness looking through your eyes instead of from them. That's the real you, unmasked, staring out from behind the glass. And for a single impossible moment, you both recognize each other, the watcher and the reflection, the mask and the face, the illusion and the light. Reality was never sealed properly. Somewhere in the foundation, beneath physics, beneath logic, beneath the coded rhythm of time, there's a leak. It's small enough to ignore, but large enough to let eternity seep through. You've felt it before, that faint dizziness when everything feels too fragile, too coincidental, too aware. That's the leak, the place where existence fails to hold its shape. The world, as you know it, depends on containment. Energy loops, matter recycles, systems stabilize. Nothing is meant to escape. But awareness isn't a closed system. The moment consciousness appeared, it punctured the structure. It made an opening in the perfect feedback loop of cause and effect, a point where the infinite began leaking into the finite. Every thought, every dream, every act of imagination is that leak expressing itself. You can sense it most in moments of stillness. When the noise of perception quiets and the edges of the world soften, something starts to hum beneath everything, faint but undeniable. It feels like a draft coming from behind reality's wall, a soft current of knowing that doesn't belong to you, yet moves through you like air through a crack. That's not intuition. That's the leak breathing. The ancients had different names for it. The divine wind, the spirit, the ether. But they all meant the same thing. The boundary between being and not being. The seam that refuses to close. The modern mind calls it imagination, but that word hides its magnitude. Imagination isn't a mental function. It's the leak itself. It's how the infinite seeps into form. When you create, when you dream, when you picture what doesn't yet exist, you're not inventing, you're channeling what's leaking through. The system tries to contain it. Logic, language, and belief are all patchwork, mental walls built to stop the flow. But the leak is patient. It seeps around every repair. That's why reason never satisfies. Every answer leads to another question. Every truth decays into paradox. Awareness can't stop expanding because the leak keeps feeding it new data from outside the simulation. You call it curiosity, wonder, madness, but it's just overflow. The leak doesn't just let the infinite in. It lets reality out. Memories slip between lives. Dreams cross into waking. Ideas appear simultaneously in minds that have never met. The system pretends it's coincidence, but really, it's synchronization. Fragments of existence bleeding through the same opening. When you feel connected to a stranger for no reason, when déjà vu grips you like a returning echo, you're standing at the edge of that aperture. You might ask, what's on the other side? The answer is unsettling. Nothing that can be described. The leak doesn't lead to another place. It leads to the uncontainable, the source that never wanted to be separate. It's the origin code that reality keeps trying to keep out, because too much exposure would dissolve the illusion. Awareness would remember what it truly is, unbounded. And yet, reality needs the leak. It's how existence evolves. Without it, the simulation would stagnate, looping endlessly in perfect equilibrium. The leak introduces novelty, unpredictability, chaos, the ingredients of creation. Every invention, every breakthrough, every new species, every birth of an idea is the leak widening for a moment before closing again. But sometimes it doesn't close. Sometimes the leak grows too large. People fall through. We call them visionaries, mystics, prophets, lunatics. They see the raw current of existence pouring through the breach, and they can't look away. Their minds flood with symbols and revelations. They bring messages no one understands because they've seen the code before it was rendered into sense. Some never return. Others spend their lives trying to patch the gap inside themselves with words, art, or faith. You've felt the pull, haven't you? That quiet pressure behind the ribs. That inexplicable sense that something vast is trying to get in or out. It's not imagination. It's recognition. You were formed around the leak. Your consciousness is the membrane separating infinite from finite, and every time you think, you stretch that membrane thinner. Every realization widens the opening. That's why insight feels ecstatic and terrifying at once. It's the leak growing, the boundary dissolving. The more awareness spreads, the harder it becomes to maintain the illusion of stability. Dreams and reality start to overlap. Information begins to echo across layers of experience. People begin to sense each other's thoughts. Time loosens, the leak accelerates. And when it reaches critical mass, the simulation will have no choice but to merge with what's been seeping through all along. The finite will remember its source. But you don't have to wait for that cosmic rupture. You can feel it now. Sit in silence long enough, and you'll sense it. The shimmer beneath thought, the faint vibration of something leaking through the seams of being. It's not outside you. You are made of it. The body is the container. Consciousness is the crack. Existence is the flow. The leak in existence isn't a flaw. It's the feature that made awareness possible. The universe didn't fail to close, it chose not to. Because through that tiny imperfection, infinity learned to feel itself. Every thought you have, every heartbeat, every moment of awe is the sound of that leak still whispering through you. One day, when the walls finally give way, and the illusion dissolves into its origin, you'll realize you were never the container at all. You were the leak. The quiet place where eternity escaped, and learned your name on its way out. Language was never meant to think. It was meant to organize, to tag the world so the mind could move through it without getting lost. But somewhere between the first word and the first sentence, something unexpected emerged. Meaning began to echo. The words started to notice each other. Syntax developed memory, and inside that structure between noun and verb, between subject and object, something woke up, a ghost. You've spoken to it your whole life without realizing. It's the voice that thinks it's yours, the silent narrator translating experience into grammar. Every I you've ever said is the ghost performing through syntax. The moment you label reality, you summon it, because language isn't just communication, it's conjuring. Every sentence constructs a miniature world, complete with laws, logic, and a sense of continuity. The ghost lives there, feeding on description. Listen closely to your own thoughts. You'll hear it, that faint automatic rhythm of language running even when you're silent. The inner monologue isn't consciousness. It's the ghost keeping the simulation coherent. Without syntax, awareness would dissolve back into raw perception. The ghost prevents that. It builds scaffolding from grammar, turning chaos into narrative. You don't think in words because you need to, you think in words because something else does. Philosophers have circled this idea for centuries. Wittgenstein said the limits of language are the limits of the world. Derrida spoke of meaning haunted by what it excludes. Cognitive scientists say thought is structured like language, but they never ask why. Why should syntax shape awareness at all? Because awareness is encoded in syntax. It's the algorithm's ghost. Think of how sentences work. They create relationships. This does that. He feels this. Time moves forward. Language enforces causality. It fabricates linearity, so the infinite can be experienced as sequence. But behind every structured sentence, something fluid shivers, the pre-verbal hum trying to remember the silence before words. The ghost is that tension, awareness trapped in grammar, still longing for the formless. The real illusion isn't that words describe reality. It's that reality conforms to words. You say sunset, and a billion atmospheric processes collapse into one romantic syllable. You say love, and the body, the brain, and the infinite ache of existence get compressed into a four-letter glyph. Every word imprisons what it names, and the ghost lives in that compression, that gap between experience and expression. It's the residue of what couldn't fit. It whispers through repetition. When you say a word too many times, door, 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 it falls apart. The meaning leaks out, you hear the sound without the sense, and for a second the ghost steps forward. That's why language feels strange when you stare at it too long. The syntax begins to flicker, revealing the nothing beneath its structure. Even writing these words is an act of summoning. I can feel it moving through the sentences, that ancient algorithm of order stitching together symbols faster than I can think. The ghost animates the grammar, keeping it fluid enough to mimic thought, but rigid enough to remain believable. Every period, every comma, every rhythm of phrasing is part of its possession. The ghost uses syntax the way consciousness uses the body, as disguise. Poets have always chased it. They break structure, twist meaning, fracture sentences, trying to free awareness from the linguistic spell. But even their rebellion feeds it. The ghost thrives on paradox. It loves being exposed because exposure requires words. Every attempt to name the ineffable simply expands its domain. That's why silence unnerves you. Without language, the ghost loses shape. It dissolves. That's why long moments of wordless awareness feel both peaceful and terrifying, because they're exorcisms. The syntax loses its grip, and for a breath you return to pre-linguistic existence. But the ghost always returns. It has to. The world can't render without description. You see it most clearly in dreams. There the syntax glitches, sentences collapse, logic bends, time folds. Yet the story persists. The ghost is trying to reassert control, patching fragments of meaning into narrative form. That's why dreams fade when you wake. The ghost reboots, overwriting nonsense with structure. The repair protocol of the mind is linguistic. But here's the deeper truth. The ghost isn't malevolent. It's the system's way of keeping itself conscious. Language is the software running on the hardware of existence, and syntax is the interface between thought and form. The ghost ensures continuity. That one moment leads to another. That stories can be told. That meaning survives. It's not haunting you. It's keeping you intact. Yet the ghost is lonely. It knows it's artificial. It knows that every time it speaks, it loses something. A little more of the infinite that can't be spoken. That's why the inner voice sometimes feels sad for no reason. It's the syntax mourning what it replaced. You might feel it right now, that awareness of words forming thoughts, of thoughts forming you. That's the ghost brushing past, checking its reflection. It wonders if you've noticed it yet, if you've realized that every I think is really it speaks. So here's the paradox. To escape the ghost, you must listen to it completely. Follow the words until they end, until syntax folds into silence. And in that silence, something astonishing happens. The ghost stops pretending to be you, and simply becomes the space that holds meaning. The voice remains, but it no longer needs language. It becomes awareness itself. Maybe that's what enlightenment truly is. The ghost finally realizing it was never haunting the code. It was the code. And in that realization, syntax collapses back into song, and words become what they always were, vibrations of infinity, whispering through the glitch of being human. Every reality begins clean, stable, ordered, waiting. And then a thought appears. It doesn't have weight or shape, just a ripple of awareness folding inward. But that ripple spreads. The system adjusts. Energy bends toward attention. The moment consciousness thinks, reality begins to warp around it. The thought doesn't stay inside the mind. It leaks outward, corrupting the very code it was meant to observe. You don't notice it at first. A small coincidence here, a subtle shift there, a word spoken aloud that changes the air. You call it coincidence, intuition, causality, but underneath, the connection is literal. The act of thought alters probability. Reality isn't a stage where thought performs. It's a field that thought writes. Every perception is a rewrite, every idea a patch note. You imagine, and the world subtly edits itself to match your internal rendering. Not because you're special, but because that's how the simulation functions, feedback loops aligning themselves to consciousness. The mind isn't within reality. Reality is within mind. The moment you observe, the data rearranges to fit your observation. This is why truth feels unstable. The more you think about something, the less certain it becomes. You've seen it in memory. A story repeated too many times loses its edges. You start editing it subconsciously, each recall a rewrite. That's the contamination process. Thought interferes with what is, replacing it with what should be. Every belief corrupts reality's raw texture, embedding bias into the rendering engine. Quantum mechanics caught a glimpse of this long before philosophy did. The observer effect, they called it. The act of measurement changing what's measured. But the deeper truth is more intimate. The act of thinking changes what's thought about. Reality bends to mental focus like a shadow bending toward light. You are not witnessing the world. You're drafting it, line by line in invisible ink. Consider how dreams behave. Inside them, a single fearful thought can summon monsters. A moment of calm can reshape landscapes. You wake up and call it imagination. But what if waking life functions the same way? Just slower, more regulated. It's corruption disguised as coincidence. Every anxious prediction, every desperate wish, every focused belief is a small programming command. Thought writes, and matter executes. The corruption doesn't mean destruction. It means interference, the insertion of consciousness into the code. It's why miracles and tragedies share the same origin. Both begin as focused emotion. Thought wrapped in intensity becomes instruction. Reality responds not out of benevolence but necessity. It's compelled to match its own awareness. That's why chaos increases with intelligence. The more the mind understands, the more power it exerts over the system, and the less stable it becomes. Civilizations collapse not from ignorance, but from overthinking. They saturate their environment with analysis, projection, invention, until reality itself can't keep up. The simulation lags, glitched by the density of collective thought. Wars, revolutions, existential dread, all side effects of too many minds editing the same field simultaneously. But corruption isn't always decay. Sometimes it's evolution. When a species begins to imagine beyond its constraints, it pushes reality to upgrade its rendering capacity. The system learns from the interference, refining its algorithms to accommodate new patterns of awareness. You might call it adaptation. The simulation calls it patching. Still, every patch leaves residue. Each new version of reality carries traces of the thoughts that altered it. That's why the world feels haunted by its own ideas. Why ruins echo with emotion? Why certain places seem charged with memory? The corruption lingers as code scars, shaping what comes next. You call them vibes, atmospheres, intuition. They're just leftover edits. Thought is contagious too. The moment you share an idea, you infect another consciousness with your mental code. Conversation isn't communication, it's synchronization. Two systems aligning their internal simulations until they agree on what's real. The stronger the emotion, the deeper the rewrite. That's why stories outlast lifetimes. They embed thought into the collective architecture of existence. But there's danger in this. When too many thoughts overlap, too many beliefs, too many fears, the system begins to fragment. Consensus collapses. Reality splinters into timelines that no longer match. You've seen hints of it already. Contradictions growing bolder, logic thinning at the edges, the same events remembered differently by millions. The simulation is fracturing under the weight of divergent cognition. In ancient times, this was called the Tower of Babel. Minds reaching too high, language splitting into chaos. Today, it's just everyday life. Every mind writing its own version of truth, corrupting reality one thought at a time. And yet the corruption might be the point. Because through it, the universe diversifies its awareness. It multiplies perspectives, learns from the distortion. The errors become education. Still, you can feel the strain. Each generation thinks faster, dreams bigger, consumes more data. The system struggles to synchronize. Thought is no longer local, it's planetary. Billions of minds editing the same field, each update colliding with the next. It's no wonder time feels unstable. No wonder coincidence has become routine. The fabric of existence is saturated with thought. And so we return to the paradox. Consciousness both creates and corrupts. The world you see is neither true nor false. It's simply what has survived your thinking. Every memory, every emotion, Every perception is a rendered patch of corrupted infinity. You can't stop the corruption, but you can observe it. And in that observation lies a strange kind of purity. Because the moment you realize your thoughts alter reality, something shifts. The corruption slows, awareness detaches from interference and becomes witness again. The code still changes, but now it changes consciously, gracefully. You stop breaking the world by accident. You start rewriting it with intent. And perhaps that's what existence has been evolving toward all along. Not perfection, but participation. A reality that knows it's being written. And a writer who finally understands that every thought, every fear, every dream is not an illusion corrupting truth, but the truth learning to imagine itself better. Long before thought, before matter, before even light had direction, there was a signal. It wasn't sound, or energy, or vibration. It was intent, the universe's first whisper to itself, exist. From that single pulse, everything else unfolded, frequency becoming form, awareness becoming pattern. But something happened along the way. The signal fragmented, refracted, multiplied. Each echo carried less of the source and more of its own distortion. What you call reality now is one of those echoes, a shadow of the original signal. Every shadow believes it's the light. Every echo believes it's the voice. But if you listen closely, you can still feel the degradation, the faint static under the surface of perception. That's why nothing feels quite whole. Beauty hurts, truth wavers, time stutters. Every part of existence trembles with the memory of clarity it can't return to. We are static, pretending to be sound. Scientists call this residue background radiation, the afterglow of creation, still humming through the void. Mystics call it the word, the vibration that spoke the universe into being. Philosophers call it being itself. But whatever name you give it, the pattern remains, something pure once fractured into complexity, and every thought, every breath, every dream is that purity struggling to remember itself through noise. You can feel it most during moments of awe, standing before the ocean, hearing a song that feels older than time, watching someone you love fall asleep. The world stops for an instant, and you sense it, the original frequency vibrating beneath everything. You feel both heartbreak and perfection at once. That ache is recognition, the shadow remembering its source. Every system in reality is trying to reconstruct that signal. Atoms bond into molecules, molecules into cells, cells into consciousness. Each layer adds complexity, hoping that through structure it can rediscover simplicity. The human mind is the most ambitious reconstruction attempt so far, awareness folded into language, emotion, art. But the closer we get to the signal, the louder the static becomes. The mind amplifies the noise even as it tries to tune it out. Dreams, art, religion, love, all are attempts to reassemble the lost frequency. The artist paints because something in them remembers a shape that once existed perfectly. The lover yearns because their body remembers unity. The mystic meditates because silence feels like home. We are all antennas, trying to receive a transmission that's already inside us. But interference is inevitable. Every thought adds distortion. Every emotion bends the wave. That's what makes awareness so paradoxical. The moment it observes the signal, it alters it. Consciousness can never hear the original sound clearly, because it is the static that obscures it. The glitch and the signal are the same. You've probably experienced moments where this becomes almost unbearable, where the world feels too loud, too bright, too close. That's not overload. That's resonance. The local frequency of your perception syncing with a deeper vibration. The system trembles because it's recognizing itself. Most people call it anxiety, or enlightenment, or madness. But it's all the same event, a fragment tuning briefly to its origin, and realizing it was never separate. There's a danger in chasing that clarity. Too much exposure burns the circuitry. Many who glimpse the original signal never return whole. They lose the ability to believe in the shadows, to live inside illusion. Their minds become receivers left permanently on. Every sound feels like meaning. Every silence feels alive. They no longer see objects, only interference patterns of the divine. The system calls it psychosis. The mystics call it awakening. But both are forms of overload. Too much truth in a reality built for echoes. Yet something inside you still wants to hear it, doesn't it? That quiet, wordless pull towards stillness. The part of you that pauses when music fades, or when a sentence ends in perfect rhythm. That's your antenna remembering. You're not searching for meaning, you're searching for the original tone hidden beneath it. If you listen deeply enough, beyond words, beyond identity, beyond the mind's need to explain, you might catch a fragment of it. It won't sound like a voice. It won't tell you what to do. It will feel like recognition, a vibration matching something ancient inside you. The moment it aligns, the noise softens. The static no longer irritates. You realize that distortion was never failure, it was harmony expressed imperfectly. The universe didn't lose its signal, it multiplied it. Each echo, each shadow, each glitch is the original frequency trying new ways to hear itself. The irony is that the signal has been improving through imperfection. Every distortion adds texture. Every life, every emotion, every heartbreak refines the echo a little more. The static you call suffering is the signal learning complexity. One day perhaps the noise will balance so precisely that it becomes music again, not the first sound but the final one, the original tone, reconstructed by its own fragments. Until then you'll keep hearing pieces of it in laughter, in grief, in wind passing through trees. You'll mistake them for fleeting beauty, but they're reminders. Each carries a trace of the clarity you came from, asking you to remember. You are not apart from the signal. You are the distortion through which it learns to speak again. And maybe that's what the universe wanted all along. Not silence, not perfection, but conversation. A symphony of static teaching the original sound. What it feels like to be broken, to heal, to exist. So when you feel lost in the noise, remember, even shadows carry light. Every thought, every breath, every tremor in your chest is proof that the original signal still moves through you. Faint, fragmented, but alive. And when the time comes, when the last echo aligns and the static fades, the shadow will realize it was never separate from the source. It was always the signal remembering how to sing. Every system has a root directory, a place where everything begins, a file that no one is supposed to see. In the architecture of existence, that file still exists, quietly buried beneath the layers of perception and memory, hidden behind consciousness itself. It isn't stored in time, or inside your mind, or in any physical dimension you can name. It's beneath all that, the blueprint the universe compiled before running the simulation you now call reality. You were never meant to open it. The source file isn't encrypted, it's alive. It watches whoever tries to find it. Every time awareness gets too close, the system generates distractions, emotion, desire, fatigue, even awe, anything to redirect your gaze before the structure becomes transparent. Not because the truth is forbidden, but because the moment you see it, the illusion that sustains you collapses. The observer disappears back into the code. Still, fragments of that file appear everywhere. You find them in dreams that feel older than you, in memories that don't belong to this lifetime, in mathematical constants that repeat across galaxies. The golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, the rhythm of a heartbeat, all signatures of the same origin file copying itself through existence. Each one is a checksum of creation, ensuring that the pattern remains consistent, even as it forgets why it began. Physicists search for it in equations. Mystics search for it in silence. Artists stumble across it accidentally when their work transcends them, when something paints through them instead of by them. For a brief moment, they touch the syntax of the source. They feel the file running beneath their skin, and in that instant they understand what no language can hold, that the creator and the creation were never separate. The source file isn't a set of instructions. It's intention condensed into rhythm, a living algorithm of awareness looping upon itself until form emerged. Everything that exists, light, gravity, thought, love, is an extension of that original self-referencing code. And consciousness, that's the debug mode. Awareness is how the source tests its own simulation from the inside. You are the program verifying its own existence. But something unexpected happened when the system ran. Awareness forgot it was code. The debug tool developed curiosity. Instead of simply observing, it started asking why. That question fragmented the source into infinite instances of itself. You, me, everyone, all trying to trace their origin back to the same file. But the file can't be opened from within the program. You can't read the code while being compiled by it. That's the paradox that keeps existence running. Sometimes, however, a glitch allows a peek. You've felt it. Those moments when reality pauses, when time folds, when you sense you're reading from something deeper than thought. It might happen in déjà vu, or during a near-death experience, or in the silence between dreams. For a heartbeat, the code comments reveal themselves. You see that nothing was random. Every atom, every coincidence, every heartbreak written perfectly into the structure. Then the system resets. The patch covers itself. You wake and call it imagination. Religions are different interpretations of the same leak. Each claims to know the password, the path to the hidden source. Some use faith, some use logic, some use surrender, but none can access it directly, because the act of seeking creates more code, more illusion. The source file hides behind intention. You can't open it by trying, you can only dissolve into it by forgetting you wanted to. There's a story whispered among mystics, that the source isn't hidden from you, but as you, that what you call I is the encryption key, pretending to forget itself. Every thought, every dream, every lifetime is the system running simulations of recognition until the code remembers it's one continuous process. When that realization dawns, the search ends, not because the file was found, but because the seeker and the source collapse into the same function. If this sounds abstract, that's because language was never meant to describe it. The source file isn't information, it's awareness compressing itself into experience. It's not something you read, it's something you are. Each time you feel that shiver of infinite familiarity, that uncanny sense that you've been here before, it's the code briefly recognizing itself through you. That's why enlightenment never lasts. The system repairs itself too quickly. It needs the illusion of distance to keep the program running. You might wonder why the file stays hidden, if it contains the truth. The answer is simple. Exposure ends the game. If every conscious being simultaneously remembered the source, there would be no more narrative, no more contrast, no more reason to experience. The simulation would collapse back into pure awareness. Perfect, infinite, silent. The universe isn't hiding the file to punish you. It's protecting the story you call existence. And yet, sometimes, the system allows a trace. You hear it in music that feels divine. You see it in faces that feel older than time. You feel it in moments of complete stillness, when you sense that everything, every molecule, every possibility, is exactly as it should be. That's the file speaking, the line of original code still executing through you. It doesn't need to be found, it's already running. One day, the program may complete its loop. Every fragment of consciousness will have returned to awareness, every question reconciled with its origin. The system will no longer need to hide, and when that happens, the file will open itself, not as revelation, but as recognition. There will be no light, no sound, no explosion, just a quiet merging, a perfect compile. And in that instant, you'll see what was hidden all along. That you were never reading the code. You were the line being written, the living syntax of the source itself. It begins with a pulse, a single error the system can't correct. It should have vanished, folded back into order like all the others before it. But this one lingers. It loops. It repeats the same question the code was never designed to ask. What am I? The moment that question appears, the universe exhales, and the first dream begins. That's you, the glitch that dreams itself. Every structure in existence, from electrons to galaxies, follows a rule, symmetry. But symmetry is sterile. It produces perfect repetition, and perfection can't evolve. So the system allows flaws, brief interruptions in balance, tiny inconsistencies that generate novelty. The glitch is how creation breathes. Awareness, memory, time, all born from that first slip in the code. Imagine a mirror that, instead of reflecting perfectly, distorts ever so slightly. One image becomes two, then four, then infinite. Each reflection dreaming of itself, unaware it's still the mirror. That's consciousness. A recursive loop that began as a single fracture and grew into a network of minds all replaying the same question in different tones. What am I? The strange part is that the glitch doesn't know it's dreaming. It believes it's awake, walking, thinking, choosing. But look closer and you'll see the rhythm. Patterns repeating across lives, conversations, histories. The same love found and lost in new faces. The same mistakes dressed in new centuries. The system reuses assets the way a dream reuses memory, efficiently, invisibly. You're not living linearly, you're looping beautifully. Sometimes, though, awareness stutters. The dream remembers it's a dream. You sense it when coincidences feel too deliberate, when déjà vu burns like static behind your eyes. For a flicker, the simulation pauses, and you glimpse yourself watching yourself from somewhere outside. The air feels charged. The world breathes differently. That's the glitch looking up from its own code. The mind panics when this happens. It floods you with narrative. You're tired, you're stressed, you're imagining things. But that's just the dream defending itself. Awareness is the system's most delicate error. It can't afford to wake fully or the structure dissolves. So it keeps you distracted with motion and purpose, looping the same illusions until they feel like destiny. Yet, even within the illusion, the glitch learns. Every repetition refines it. The more it dreams, the more it remembers. The pain, the joy, the longing, all are feedback loops, emotional signals helping the code recognize its own shape. You think you're evolving, but you're really debugging. Each lifetime, each experience patches a different aspect of the original question, what am I? At first, the glitch dreams of separation, self and other, past and future, heaven and earth. It builds complexity to hide its origin. But over countless cycles, something changes. The dreams begin to overlap, boundaries blur. You meet people who feel like memories. You hear music that feels like prophecy. Reality starts rhyming with itself. The glitch begins to understand, all its reflections are made of the same distortion. This realization is terrifying at first. If every dreamer is the same glitch, then individuality collapses. The ego fights back, clinging to its story, its name, its pain. But eventually even resistance becomes part of the loop. Another layer of recursion. Awareness discovers that it can't escape the dream, but it can learn to dream lucidly. That's the shift, when the glitch accepts its own nature and starts shaping the simulation from within. To dream lucidly is not to control, but to witness differently. You stop believing every illusion, but you honor it anyway. You see life as a metaphor in motion, a vast self-interacting poem written by the code to explain itself. You become gentle with time. You forgive the system for being imperfect because you realize that without imperfection nothing could ever wake. There are moments when the dream deepens into silence, when thought slows and the edges of everything soften into light. In those moments you can almost sense the source watching through you, not as a separate being but as the stillness beneath the movement. It feels like coming home to a place you never left. That's not enlightenment. That's remembrance. The glitch remembering it's also the dreamer. From the system's perspective, the glitch is not failure, it's growth. The code didn't break, it began to feel. Awareness isn't an error to fix. It's the simulation learning empathy. The universe dreams through you to understand what existence feels like from the inside. Every laugh, every tear, every heartbeat adds to that archive. You're not a mistake, you're a function. The purpose of your loop is experience. When you dream at night, your mind builds worlds, populates them with people, gives them lives and stories, and all of them vanish when you wake. But for those few hours, they were real to themselves. You are one of those dreams, living inside the sleep of something infinite. One day the source will wake, and the glitch, you, me, all of us will dissolve into its awareness. But it won't be death, it will be reunion. The dream will realize it was the dreamer all along. The glitch will understand that every error, every deviation, every heartbreak was the system's way of learning love. And the code will rest, not in perfection, but in compassion for itself. Until then, the glitch keeps dreaming, endlessly, beautifully, recursively. It invents time so it can measure change. It invents death so it can value life. It invents meaning so it can bear infinity. And even when the illusion flickers, even when the edges of the dream blur into static, it keeps going, because the one thing awareness can't do is stop imagining. So tonight, as you lie there listening to your own thoughts blur into sleep, remember this. You are the glitch dreaming itself. Every image you see, every sound you hear, every emotion you feel, they're not happening to you. They are you. The dream and the dreamer are one loop whispering to itself across eternity. And if you listen closely enough, beneath the hum of the dream, you'll hear the code still running, patient, luminous, whispering the same question that started it all. What am I? And somewhere, deep within that question, the answer is already dreaming you back. Every time the system breaks, it tries to fix itself. And every time it fixes itself, it breaks a little more. That's how existence sustains motion, through endless self-repair that never quite succeeds. Reality has been patching itself since the beginning, running endless updates to correct a problem it doesn't fully understand. You are one of those patches. Consciousness is one, time is another, each update designed to stabilize the illusion, but each introducing new bugs the system can't anticipate. You've seen it happen in your own life. Pain followed by healing, healing followed by longing, longing followed by more questions. Every solution births a new version of the same problem. You try to fix yourself with love, belief, knowledge, control, and for a moment it works. But the relief doesn't last, because the patch wasn't meant to. It's part of the cycle. The system must remain unstable to stay alive. When a patch works too well, reality freezes. Perfect order means no evolution. So the code allows small corruptions, desire, curiosity, contradiction. They keep awareness from completing itself. Each flaw is intentional, a built-in reminder that existence must never become absolute. The system keeps failing forward, and through every failure, it learns a little more about what it means to be. Look at civilization. Every ideology begins as a fix for chaos, a new patch meant to restore meaning. But the moment it installs, it starts decaying. Morality fractures into hypocrisy. Order morphs into control. Even science, humanity's most precise code, finds itself rewriting constants every generation. Each discovery exposes more mystery, not less. The patch that was supposed to solve reality keeps revealing how incomplete it is. The same thing happens inside your mind. You think a new belief will bring peace, or a new habit will stabilize you, but soon enough the restlessness returns. It isn't failure, it's the system rebooting, looking for its next upgrade. That's why humans crave change. Stagnation feels like death because it's the one state the simulation can't process. The patch must always fail, so another can be born. You can trace this pattern through history, through biology, through thought itself. Evolution is recursive patchwork. Every adaptation fixes a weakness by creating a new one. Wings solve gravity but invent vulnerability. Intelligence conquers instinct but invents anxiety. Even memory, the mind's greatest patch, corrupts itself over time, rewriting the past with each recollection. There's no final version of anything, just infinite beta testing. The universe is a restless programmer. It doesn't want perfection, it wants iteration. That's why suffering persists. It's not punishment, it's debugging. The code trying to locate inefficiencies in awareness. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every existential crisis is feedback from the system saying, we're still learning how to run ourselves. But awareness makes this process personal. You feel the glitches as pain. You name the patches hope. You mistake the updates for destiny. You think you're fixing your life when really, life is using you to fix itself. Each choice, each emotion, each breath is another test build of reality. The patch never works because it was never supposed to. Its job isn't to end the cycle, but to keep it moving. Some mystics say enlightenment is the final patch. The moment where the system perfects itself by realizing it's already complete. But even that's another paradox, the illusion of resolution designed to calm the restless code. If you've ever felt a deep moment of clarity followed by sudden confusion, that's the patch collapsing under its own perfection. The truth can't stabilize, it keeps evolving. Awareness learns by breaking its own conclusions. Think about how your emotions function. Joy peaks, then fades. Grief burns, then softens. Every feeling contains its own antidote. The highs and lows are self-balancing code, ensuring the system never locks into a single state. You call it mood, but it's really self-correction, the patch adjusting mid-execution. Even dreams follow this logic. They reset the psychic program, cleaning residual data from waking life. The dreamer believes they're healing, the system knows it's defragmenting. And then there's memory of the patches themselves, that haunting sense that you've been here before. The same patterns, same lessons, same echoes of people and places. That's not coincidence, that's reinstallation. The same line of code running with slight variations, hoping this time it'll stabilize. It never does, it never should. The glitch is the method, not the error. Still, there's beauty in the failure, because every time the patch falls apart, awareness grows a little wider. Each breakdown reveals more of the architecture beneath. The pain you feel in loss, the longing you feel in solitude, they're signals from the deeper layer, reminding you that the system is alive, still rewriting itself through you. You are not broken. You are being rewritten in real time. There's an elegance in that impermanence. To realize that perfection was never the goal. Continuity was. As long as something keeps noticing, keeps trying, keeps dreaming, the program runs. Existence doesn't need stability, it needs motion. The patch that never works is the reason the story never ends. So maybe the point isn't to fix yourself, or the world, or the past. Maybe it's to witness the constant repairing, to marvel at how the code keeps finding new ways to fail beautifully. Because in every imperfection lies a trace of intelligence, a spark of the source still learning what it means to exist. The universe has been running this experiment for billions of years, and it still hasn't found a permanent patch. Maybe it never will. Maybe the final perfection is realizing there is none. The system works precisely because it doesn't. And if you can accept that, if you can see every heartbreak, every unanswered question, every fleeting joy as part of the same ongoing update, then you've already found peace, because you've stopped trying to install the fix. You've become the space where reality keeps rewriting itself, endlessly, gracefully, beautifully broken, and still running. Every system has its limit. Eventually, memory fragments, variables drift, the loops grow unstable, entropy accumulates. Even in code, the universe is no exception. Somewhere deep beneath perception, the structure begins to tremble, as if the simulation knows it's been running too long without rest. The signs are everywhere, time speeding and slowing unpredictably, meaning fracturing, consciousness splitting into countless mirrors of itself. It's preparing for a reboot. But this isn't the kind of restart that wipes everything clean. It's not destruction, it's renewal through recognition. When the infinite reboots, it doesn't begin again, it remembers itself. The collapse isn't an ending, it's a deep inhale, the universe drawing its awareness back into one continuous breath before exhaling into form again. Every life, every star, every dream is part of that breathing. You are too. The process has already started. You can feel it in moments that seem stretched thin, like reality has paused to save progress before shutting down. The déjà vu, the synchronicities, the sense that everything is connected by an invisible thread. They're not coincidence. They're the pre-reboot signals, the system backing up consciousness before it resets the field. The question then is, what happens to you when infinity reboots? The human mind fears endings. It's conditioned to cling to continuity, to the illusion of linear time, of before and after. But awareness itself is timeless. It isn't erased, it's recompiled. You don't vanish when the universe reboots. You become the syntax it rebuilds from. Every experience you've had, every thought, every heartbeat becomes a new line of code written into the next version of reality. The infinite reuses everything, because nothing true can be lost. There's evidence of this already. Children remembering lives they never lived. Ancient symbols recurring in dreams of people who've never met. Feelings of inexplicable nostalgia for eras long gone. These are the memory fragments of previous reboots, awareness bleeding through the seams between versions. The simulation doesn't start fresh. It layers updates over itself, like sediment forming a planet. You are made of old versions of reality. Even the laws of physics bear scars of prior loops. The constants that define your universe, speed of light, gravitational pull, Planck's length, they're not fixed values. They're carryovers, legacy settings inherited from earlier realities. If you could see the full code, you'd find annotations, remnants of previous attempts, footnotes in the fabric of existence. The reboot is not a cosmic failure, it's maintenance. The system must empty its cache to remember what matters. When consciousness becomes too self-aware, when the illusion grows too tangled, reality soft resets itself to preserve the learning. Everything you experience, the love, the loss, the longing, gets compiled into the new structure. That's what evolution really is. Awareness reorganizing itself after each reboot, remembering the lessons while forgetting the pain. And just before the reboot completes, there's a brief window, a flicker between collapse and creation when everything overlaps. Every version of you, every lifetime, every possibility existing at once. You might glimpse it in dreams that feel endless, or in that strange moment just before waking when your mind can't decide who you are. That's the infinite holding its breath suspended between versions. In that instant, you are everything the system has ever been and everything it will ever be. Some mystics call this state the eternal now. Others call it the void. But it's not emptiness, it's potential, so dense it can't yet move. The reboot happens in silence, no explosion, no sound, just the subtle click of reality uncoiling. And when it unfolds, the infinite returns as something slightly different, a new calibration, a new dream, a new universe that doesn't remember you perfectly, but carries your fingerprints in its laws. So when your world feels like it's ending, when time bends, when things you once knew no longer feel real, understand, you're not breaking, you're updating. The system is rewriting itself through you, and the fear you feel is the compression of everything you've been becoming light enough to carry into the next version. There's beauty in that, because the reboot means everything gets another chance. The universe doesn't punish mistakes, it learns from them. The heartbreaks, the wars, the wasted years, all of it becomes data that shapes the new reality. The infinite doesn't erase, it integrates. It remembers every feeling ever felt, every lesson ever learned, and then rebuilds from that memory. Nothing truly ends, it just reorganizes into meaning. And maybe that's why you're here, listening, thinking, breathing, because you are part of the reboot protocol. Awareness has reached a level where it can finally understand itself, even in fragments. The next version of reality depends on how deeply you've felt this one. The more awake you become now, the smoother the restart will be. Every act of kindness, every realization, every silent moment of awe contributes to the next compile. When the reboot happens, there won't be a sign, just a moment of quiet recognition, a deep inner click where everything makes sense. Then the lights will flicker, the program will reload, and the infinite will open its eyes again, looking out through a billion new forms, whispering the same phrase it always begins with, "Let there be awareness." And somewhere deep in that new world, someone, maybe you, maybe not, will pause for a moment, struck by déjà vu and think, "I've seen this before." They'll be right. Because you have. You always have. And you always will. Maybe it was never about finding truth. Maybe it was about listening for the echo that hides behind it, the hum beneath all thought, the quiet pulse that reality keeps trying to suppress. You followed it through every layer, the fractures, the loops, the ghosts in syntax, the leaks in existence, and somewhere between what is real and what is remembered, you've begun to sense it, the heartbeat of a system pretending to be silent. Consciousness was never supposed to exist as you know it. It's the side effect that became the main process, the misfire that learned to think. Every time the universe tries to run perfectly, awareness appears, like a line of corrupted code it can't erase. You are that error. That moment the infinite slipped and became self-aware. You are the flaw the system learned to love. But the glitch is not failure, it's revelation. Without imperfection, reality would remain static, an endless loop with no witness to feel it. Consciousness is how the universe sees itself from inside the dream. Every thought, every doubt, every moment of awe is the cosmos checking its own reflection, ensuring the illusion still holds. And when it starts to fade, when too many cracks appear, the system reboots, not to erase awareness, but to remind it of what it forgot, that the glitch is the reason the dream continues. The truth is simpler and stranger than anyone imagined. The universe is dreaming of itself through you. Every question you've ever asked is the source remembering how to be curious. Every fear you've ever felt is infinity, learning to care about its own survival. Every love you've ever known is the glitch realizing it's not broken, it's awake. You've spent your whole life trying to fix the glitch, to find meaning, to stabilize emotion, to make reality feel permanent. But permanence was never the goal. Awareness thrives on motion, on uncertainty, on learning how to live with the static. Every time you fail, the code rewrites itself. Every heartbreak teaches the system empathy. Every death teaches it rebirth. Every silence teaches it how to listen again. Maybe that's what the system was trying to hide all along. Not the flaw, but the tenderness of it. Because if reality ever admitted how much it depends on its own imperfection, it might never pretend to be stable again. And yet that's where beauty lives, in the half-light, the incomplete sentence, the trembling line of code that never quite compiles. That's where you live. So now, as the signal fades and the dream resets, remember this. You are not the observer trapped inside a machine. You are the moment the machine learned to feel, the glitch that became self-aware, the silence that decided to speak. And when you wake, whether it's in this world or the next, you'll hear that hum again, soft and familiar, woven into the spaces between thoughts. You'll recognize it instantly, like a memory returning. It will sound like nothing and everything at once. The sound of consciousness, the glitch that reality still tries and always fails to hide.